Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum braucht er was zum Essen, bitte sehr. Es macht ihn ein Geschwätz nicht satt, das schafft kein Essen her.
Drum links, zwei, drei, drum links, zwei, drei, wo dein Platz genossen ist. Weil ich heim in die Arbeit einheimst komm, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum hat der Stiefel im Gesicht nicht gern. Er will unter sich keinen Sklaven sehen und über sich keinen Herrn.
Drum links, zwei, drei, drum links, zwei, drei, wo dein Platz genossen ist. Weil ich heim in die Arbeiter einheimst komm, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Prolet ein Prolet ist, drum wird ihn kein anderer befreien. Es kann die Befreiung der Arbeiter nur das Werk der Arbeiter sein.
Drum links, zwei, drei, drum links, zwei, drei, wo dein Platz genossen ist. Weil ich heim in die Arbeiter einheimst komm, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Здравствуйте, comrades. Welcome to Socialism Saturday. Socialism Saturday is when we watch the furthest of the far left, the most dystopian of the dystopian. This is your advanced AP class on all things Marxist. And we do this every Saturday at 6 p.m. because what we have discovered in the nearly 1 year, we are coming up on our 1 year anniversary of starting Socialism Saturday. Because we accidentally discovered about a year ago that if you go back 3, 4, 5 years and you find the real socialist activists, we're not talking about AOC, we're not talking about Bernie Sanders, we're not talking about CNN socialism, we're sure as shit not talking about champagne socialists like Vosh. If you go back and you find the real socialist activists, the ones writing the socialism books that are published by the socialism book publishers and sold in the socialism bookstores and presented at the literal socialism conferences. There is a literal conference called Socialism. If you go back and watch those people 3, 4, 5 years ago, what they were saying 3, 4, 5 years ago have become the talking points of the Democratic Party today. So, the reason that we watch Real Socialism on this channel is because it is a sneak preview of what is coming next. It is your ultimate guide to why the woke left is doing every single insane thing in the world that they are doing. And for some reason, even though the conservative right screams about socialism and Marxists and socialism and Marxists all day, every day, they still haven't really wrapped their head around the idea that all of the crazy stuff that's going on in the world does really come from socialism. The real socialist activists. Now, the conservative right doesn't even know who the real socialist activists are. They have no idea what they're saying. They are not listening to them in the way that we do. And that is why people who patronize my channel for happy hours and Socialism Saturdays and my other streams too, but those are the key ones, you guys know more about what is going on the woke left than anyone else on the internet. I really firmly believe that, and I have yet to be disproven because you know where the ideas come from. You know where the language comes from. You can pick up the language when you hear it in the real world. And guess what, guys? If you're new to Socialism Saturday, and let us know in the chat if you're new here, because we do love newbies to come and join us. However, it's a little bit of it's a lot. If you're new to Socialism Saturday, if this is your first time, welcome. We're really glad you're here. We will guide you on the journey into the craziest content that you have ever watched on the internet before. It's hard at first, but I promise if you just stick with it, we have some tasty drinks. Get a snack. We'll be here for a while. And when you watch a couple of Socialism Saturdays, you start to understand and appreciate what's going on in the world on an entirely new level that you just weren't privy to before because you weren't listening to the right people. But you know what? You found us. We're here. We've been here all along. All right, guys. I apologize for being a couple minutes late. I was a couple minutes late because guess what? I just got some merch. I just got some merch from my merch store that I was opening, including my All Tears Are Tasty mug. And I'm going to show you some of that merch in a second. But before I show you the merch, what I want to do is show you today's presentation. Now, my original plan for today was that I wanted to watch an anti-work presentation because there is this entire socialist movement that is against people working. And you guys might hear in like the mainstream media this idea of like quiet quitting and people just refusing to go back to work and get a job after the pandemic, stuff like that. There is actually a whole movement within the socialist activist movement that is about anti-work, like being against work in general. And we haven't really delved into that level of socialism. So I was kind of looking around for an anti-work presentation today. And I vaguely remembered that I had seen an anti-work activist on one of our favorite socialist book publishers. Verso Books is one of the key socialist book publishers, okay? And so I went on their YouTube channel. We don't normally watch Verso because for some reason I just don't like them all that much. I don't know what it is. I think Haymarket is much better. I think that there are some socialist bookstores that are much better. Red May is much better. Like there are other. I just think that their content is not quite up to snuff with every other socialism provider. However, I went on Verso Books' YouTube page today, and let me show you what I found. We are not watching anti-work because the very first video that I saw on Verso Books' YouTube channel was right here. Anti-racism must mean anti-capitalism. I'm sorry, what? Now, those of you who know me know that I am, well, a proponent of teaching people about how socialists actually use language. And over in my Unwoke art store, why don't we have the t-shirt? Where's the t-shirt? Where did the t-shirt go? Here it is. Over in the Unwoke art store, I have a series of merchandise called the Subversive series. And basically the Subversive series is this series of clothing and bags and there are hats. I had to take the hats out of the store for a hot minute because I'm updating the design a little bit to tweak it to make it look even nicer than it already does. But like we've got shirts, we've got bags, we've got stickers, and I put basically language on them decoding what the woke language means. And one of the key phrases that I've been drilling into you guys for over a year now is that whiteness, systemic racism, white supremacy, all those things, they are not about skin color. They're not about white people. There are a lot of people who will tell you that it makes sense why people are confused, right? Because socialists speak in code. One of the reasons I made the Subversive series, which again, you can buy a t-shirt and wear it around that says whiteness is capitalism, then you can explain to people what that means. I'm going to tell you. It makes sense that people are confused about whiteness being about skin color because they're trying to make you think it's about skin color, but it's not. The term whiteness and capitalism are used almost interchangeably by socialist activists because when far left activists are using the term whiteness, they are using it to mean the bourgeois, the boss, the landlord, the person who owns the power structure. That is why Larry Elder A very black man, when he ran for governor of California, was called the black face of white supremacy by the Los Angeles Times. That's why Enrique Tarrio, who used to be the leader of the Proud Boys, but is not white at all, he's Afro-Cuban. That's why the Washington Post wrote an article with Enrique Tarrio in their header image called Multiracial Whiteness. Because whiteness does not have to do with skin color, it has to do with capitalism. And capitalism, of course, is the greatest enemy of the woke left. So I bring this up because I've been drilling this into people for years and years and years. Well, maybe at least 1 year is when I've been saying it overtly. I have merch saying it. And now it kind of seems as though Verso Books, along with many other people, because I have many other quotes from other people, but Verso Books is giving us a little gift. Because Verso Books is making it clear that anti-racism is not about black versus white people, like black skin color versus white skin color. They're saying explicitly in their thumbnail that anti-racism must mean anti-capitalism. I'm going to tell you something else about this presentation, which is actually called, the proper title of it is called, What is Anti-Racism? We're going to hear tonight from a woman named Ruth Wilson Gilmore. Does anyone know who Ruth Wilson Gilmore is and the history that Ruth Wilson Gilmore has on Socialism Saturday? I'm going to tell you because we just ran into Ruth Wilson Gilmore the other day as well. Ruth Wilson Gilmore was one of the first people that I ever streamed for Socialism Saturday over a year ago, because Ruth Wilson Gilmore was giving a keynote address at the conference that is literally titled Socialism, and her keynote address was about racial capitalism. So I'm assuming that Ruth Wilson Gilmore is here to talk about racial capitalism and what that has to do with being anti-racist, which again has nothing to do with skin color because Ibram X. Kendi is a Marxist. It only has to do with overthrowing the bourgeois, the boss, the owners, the people that own private property, stuff like that. That's all it is. The capitalists, the evil free market capitalists. That is, of course, the number one enemy of the woke left, and we're going to watch them explain it today. Here is the description for the presentation we're going to watch. It is called "What is Anti-Racism?" Ruth Wilson Gilmore and Arun Kundandi. I don't know how to say his name. Sorry, Arun. Why has liberalism been ineffective at combating racism? And what would a more radical anti-racism look like? I think even this first sentence is telling, because does everyone remember our friend Robin DiAngelo? Does anyone not remember our friend Robin DiAngelo? Robin DiAngelo was really big like several years ago, 3, 4, 5 years ago, because Robin DiAngelo wrote a book called White Fragility. White Fragility was on the New York Times bestseller list forever. Every woke leftist was having white fragility book clubs. Robin DiAngelo, literally in her book, wrote a chapter about how white women will cry to get out of taking responsibility for being racist, okay? So a lot of people know Robin DiAngelo in association with the book White Fragility. Does anyone know, pop quiz for the chat, does anyone know what the book after White Fragility was that Robin DiAngelo wrote? Because Robin DiAngelo has since published, I think, 2 more books, but the book directly after White Fragility, does anyone know what that book was called or what it was about? I know because I own it and I read it. Yes, I use capitalism to buy it. What was Robin DiAngelo's next book after White Fragility? Yes, you guys got it. Reagan, it was called Nice Racism. That's exactly right. And Suspicious Bird, correct. Robin DiAngelo's book after White Fragility was called Nice Racism. And it was all about how white liberals are the worst racists of them all. And so I say that because when I read a sentence like, why has liberalism been ineffective at combating racism? That just screams like, oh, this is Robin DiAngelo, man, because Robin DiAngelo was like, you liberals suck at combating racism. She even wrote a whole book about it. It's like they've given up on the conservative right. They're like, you're obviously racist. Why are they targeting liberals? Here's the next question. Why is Robin DiAngelo and the actual Marxist, Ruth Wilson Gilmore, and this Arun character, why are they specifically saying, liberals, you suck at racism? You are the most racist of them all, liberals. Why are they specifically going after liberals, do you think? Any ideas? Anyone? No, Robin DiAngelo was not a white liberal. This is not right. Robin DiAngelo was not a white liberal. Why do you think that this is a Marxist book publisher is going after white liberals? Kristen! Liberals are not Marxists. It's not that they're easier to convert to Marxism. That's not it. It's that they're... Joe. Oh, no, I misread that, Joe. Never mind. I was about to yell at you. I don't need to yell. I misread it. My fault. But Christian is correct. Marxists, socialists do not like liberals because they do not like true liberalism. And this is why conservatives really need to stop going after liberals, because to be quite frank, liberals have more in common with conservatives, real liberals, than progressives and socialists do. Real liberals and real socialists are not friends. They have completely different priorities. They have completely different views of the world. It's not that they're easier to convert to Marxism, because they're not. It's because they are actually the number one enemy. So, nope, liberals are not more prone to... Are you... Come on, guys. Come on. Listen, I expect a little bit more from people who watch me all the time. Tinge, you've been around for a while. You really think liberals are more prone to being people pleasers? That's just not factually correct, man. Come on. Yeah, liberals still believe in private property ownership. Indeed. Anyway, let's continue reading the description of this presentation. On July 13th, 2023, Ruth Wilson Gilmore joined Arun at an event to launch his new book, What is Anti-Racism? And Why It Means Anti-Capitalism, at the Independent Social Research Foundation in London. This is the event footage from that evening. And that's all it is. It's a book launch for this book about why anti-racism means anti-capitalism. And hopefully they'll be saying the quiet part out loud quite a bit in this presentation. Guys, again, they don't even include... Listen, the woke left already believe they've defeated conservatives. Can we be brass tacks about this for a second? The real Marxists, the real socialists, I'll get to it in a second, Naruto. The real Marxists, the real socialists already believe they've defeated conservatives. The conservative right is nowhere in their frame of reference. They don't think about them. They don't really worry about them. The only time they talk about the conservative right is to rile up their people. So they're not talking about the conservative right because they're threatened by them. They're talking about the conservative right to rile up their people because they know that they are so far ahead of conservatives that they are immaterial. Conservatives to real socialists are like a fly. They're not really worried about the fly. They don't really care about the fly. They'll swat the fly if it comes near them, but they're not concerned about it at all because they could take a newspaper or a fly swatter at any time and beat the shit out of that fly, and that fly is going to be dead. So no, the real enemy of socialists is not actually conservatives. They don't care about conservatives at all. Let's get to Naruto's super chat. To the person yesterday who argued that God didn't make fire, I suggest going outside discovering these things called the sun and the stars. I would tend to agree with that. I would tend to agree with that, Naruto. Thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. All right, guys. So that is what we are watching on Socialism Saturday here today. We got a couple other orders of business before we do get started. Number one, let me get out those bingo cards. Bing. Because we do play bingo on Socialism Saturday. So let me drop that bingo card in the chat over on the YouTubes, and I'll drop it in the chat over on the Rockfin, or not Rockfin, and well, I am on Rockfin. I suppose I could drop it in the chat on Rockfin. I'll drop it in the chat on all of them. Why not? I just dropped it in the chat on Rumble. There you go, Rockfin. And if you are watching on Odyssey right now, I'll drop it in the chat over there. You can come play bingo with us. To get your bingo card, just click generate card. All bingo cards are different. You get the free square in the middle. Then we're going for lines, or we're going for corners. There will be solidarity twice on the bingo card because I still haven't updated it. I actually do need to make a lot of changes to this bingo card. I have many more socialist words now than I did when I originally made the bingo card. But there you go. You guys can play bingo. Shout out bingo in the chat. If you get a bingo, you won't win anything, but you will receive a hearty round of applause and congratulations. Let's see. We've got a couple more things. As always, please do make sure you are subscribed to my Substack, which is Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. I'm going to be posting some more stuff later on tonight after Socialism Saturday. I always have so many more things I want to post on my Substack that I actually have time to post. But I really do have a lot of granular stuff that I want to post this week. So a lot has gone on this week. So please make sure you are signed up. Of course, you can always subscribe for free and get my free content, because of which there is quite a bit of free content over on the Substack. But if you do want to support the work I'm doing, because I cannot do it without you, you can sign up for a monthly membership for $8 a month, or an annual membership for $80 a year, whatever floats your boat. When you sign up for a monthly membership or an annual membership, you get access to a variety of perks, to include 2 private, unrecorded Zoom calls with me and my community every single week on Monday and Wednesdays. We also do a monthly Bitchcraft. We actually just did that today. That was a really nice call. We had actually some really interesting conversation on the Bitchcraft call today, so that was really fun. Thank you guys for coming out to that. Another thing we also always do is weekly movie nights on Sunday. On Sunday in the supporter Discord at 8 p.m. Eastern time, we do watch a movie together. And today, or tomorrow rather, is the 1-year anniversary of movie night. So we have watched over 50 movies together in my supporter Discord in the past year, and we are celebrating Reagan's belated birthday with her birthday pick of Inception tomorrow night at 8 p.m. in the supporter Discord. If you sign up for a membership on my locals, my Substack, on this here YouTube channel, if you sign up for a channel membership, or if you are on my Patreon, you will get access to the supporter Discord tomorrow, and you can come and join us for movie night, and that will be great. Another way you can support my work is by heading over to the Unwoke Art store and picking up some cool merch. And I did want to just take a second to show you guys the merch that I just got. Of course, you can get the All Tears Are Tasty designs. I have the All Tears Are Tasty tumbler, and now I just have my All Tears Are Tasty mug too that I just got today, which looks great. I'm really excited about that. I also did get a couple t-shirts. Let me show you. This is t-shirt number 1 that I got that you can get in the Unwoke Art store right now. It says, "This is your child on public school." I think that came out really great. I'm really excited about that one. But to our interest tonight, inspired by Autumn, our socialist friend in the chat, we have the iconic "Socialists Always Lie" t-shirt. And this is one of my favorite things. I literally created this last week during Socialism Saturday, maybe 2 weeks ago, I don't know. But you can now get the "Socialists Always Lie" t-shirt in the Unwoke Art store. There it is. You can get it in black. I, of course, got it in black. You can also get it in 3 shades of pink because women wanted pink Barbie options when I made the t-shirt. If you don't want it in pink, that's cool. You can get it in gray. You can get it in navy. You can get it in purple. You can get it in blue. You can get it in white. I do prefer the black, though, because I just think it looks sick. So if you want to pick up your "Socialists Always Lie" t-shirt, hang on, I'll put the link in the chat. "Socialists Always Lie" t-shirt. There you go. You can head over to the Unwoke Art store, pick out whichever color makes your heart sing, and then wear it proudly, because no matter how nice the socialists are, no matter how much time they spend in our chat, Autumn, we always must remind ourselves that socialists always lie. And we should never, ever, 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 ever believe a word coming out of their mouth, even if they're nice to us. We can hang out, we can be cordial, but never, ever trust them, because their only goal is always and forever to gain power over you so that they can get you to do what they want. And we want to make sure everyone else knows that too. And that's why we made the Socialists Always Lie t-shirt, available now in the Unwoke art store. All right, guys, that is all the stuff I have, except I do want to show you guys something. So hang on. So we have some fun fall ciders that I'm going to be drinking today. I have 2 kinds of cider from 1911 Cider Company. I have the cider donut cider, which is so good, and I'm really looking forward to it. I also have candy corn cider, which Victor drank one of these yesterday, and it was really sweet, but I have yet to try it. So I've got my cider donut cider and my candy corn cider from 1911 Cider Company, and I wanted to show you guys this. I am drinking out of a very special glass and it's a little bit smaller than my normal glasses, but this is a very special glass because the glass actually comes out of it, and it has and Victor actually got me this for my birthday because this is for drinking tea. And he actually has, he got me this really nice, Russian tea set as well, where you can actually brew the tea. But isn't that cool? I have a fancy Russian Ukrainian glass that comes in a little cozy handle, and that's what I'm going to be drinking out of today. And cheers to my wonderful husband, Victor, for putting up with me all these years. And for still, I got to give Victor credit, man. Victor buys the coolest presents. I just he always comes up with something special. And his birthday is going to be in a couple weeks. So now I got to buy him a cool present too. Cheers. Best husband ever. He always takes care of me and got me an awesome glass. All right, guys. Now, with all that lovey-dovey stuff out of the way, let's get into our presentation for today. Please go ahead and mount that like button for me if you would be so kind. There is a shocking disparity between the number of people watching right now and the number of people who have mounted that like button. So can we just bump up those numbers a little bit? Bump up those numbers before we get started. Again, just as a reminder, I do stream Socialism Saturday every single Saturday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, and we watch Real Socialists, the most dystopian of the dystopian. Let us know if you are new in the chat. If you are new and you don't understand what they're saying, please let us know in the chat. If you have some ideas about what they're saying and want to offer commentary, please put that in the chat as well. I will try to decode as much as I possibly can, but I can't be the one with all the good ideas. We have a lot of smart people here, so let's all help each other learn what the real socialists are up to. Let's get this party started, guys. We are watching What is Anti-Racism and Why It Must Mean Anti-Capitalism.
Thank you all for coming along. And thanks to the Institute of Race Relations for supporting this evening. And thanks to Chris and Lars and everyone at the Independent Social Research Foundation who supported my writing the book with a fellowship. And it's a huge honor to be launching the book with Ruthie, whose work has been so penetrating and exemplary.
Beth, you saucy minx, Beth.
I began thinking about this book in the summer of 2020 when in the United States, where I live, we had at least 15 million people participating in the Black Lives Matter insurrection across the United States.
The Black Lives Matter insurrection.
That summer, the people of the United States declared in an opinion poll that they supported the burning down of police stations as a form of anti-racist protest. So this was a remarkable moment. And as with any movement, people were involved for many.
Does anyone find it ironic at all that he just called, and by the way, for those who don't know, they called the summer of 2020 the George Floyd uprising, and he's just called it the Black Lives Matter insurrection. And these are the same people who will lose their mind at the insurrection of January 6th, but their insurrection is acceptable. But the Trump supporters walk through the velvet ropes in the Capitol building and don't disturb anything and don't burn down any buildings. And they're like, insurrection, it's bad. These damn insurrectionists. But they're like, yeah, we had the Black Lives Matter insurrection, and we're totally cool with that, and it's totally appropriate.
Many different reasons. But the aims of defunding the police, of abolishing prisons, abolishing ICE, the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, those were the central kind of demands. And the activists accused policing and carceral and border agencies of not reducing violence, but adding to it. They were not organizations that made us safer, but infrastructures of racist violence and inequality. And the problem was not just individually biased police officers, prison officers, deportation officers, who were deviating from rules of appropriate behavior, but the character of those rules themselves was what the problem that was being highlighted, right? So the people on the streets understood racism as this kind of structural force. They weren't calling for those infrastructures of violence to be reformed through better officer training or increasing the diversity of officers or something like that. They demanded the dismantling of these infrastructures. But what interested me, especially in thinking about this book, was how the institutions of liberal America then responded to this insurrection in the summer of 2020. And everywhere you looked, you saw white liberals who were talking about how to challenge unconscious bias.
Hang on. I want to highlight Marcelo's chat. And Marcelo, it may seem like I'm picking on you, but I'm really not. Calling non-socialists that say socialists are liars provocative is like calling socialists intelligent. Socialists are irrational. Here's the thing. Socialists are not irrational. Socialists have completely different values than we do. Socialists have completely different priorities than we do. But that doesn't mean they're irrational. They're actually incredibly rational when you think about what their real goals are, which are always and forever. And guys, what are the 4 goals of the woke left? I want to see a chat full of the 4 goals of the woke left. The goals that socialists have that are unspoken are gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. They can never get to the 4th goal, which is their Marxist utopia, without gaining power, which they've already done, without destabilizing the system to cause, which just means them causing problems. They cause problems that cause other people pain. They then attack capitalism by saying capitalism is the cause of all your problems. And they're the problems that the socialists caused, but they're going to blame capitalism for those problems to try to turn the general public against the economic system that runs the United States, because unless they turn people against capitalism, they cannot reach their 4th goal, which is to usher in their Marxist utopia. So if we look at the 4 goals of the woke left, every single thing that they do at all times is meant to achieve at least one, if not more than one of those goals. Gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. Socialists are actually incredibly rational. But you have to keep in mind that they are rational to their goals, not to your goals, to their goals. And you always have to keep in mind that just because, okay, you're apparently not listening. Sure, let's see, this is the mistake that conservatives always make. Sure, let's call the burning of small businesses that a family had spent their entire life savings to offer a service to the community a totally acceptable loss. No one has ever called, bro. I need you to rein in your feelings. I need you to do a couple deep breaths, and I will explain to you again that the 4 goals of the woke left are gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. So, when you are a person that believes in those goals, then yes, burning down a small business is going to destabilize the system, and it's going to attack capitalism, which they must do in order to achieve their goals. And you crying about it is not going to change their goals. You whining about it is not going to change their goals. You calling them names is not going to change their goals. If you don't understand why people are doing what they're doing, then you can never, ever, ever defeat them. So the point of Socialism Saturday is that our goal is to understand why they are doing what they're doing and what they're going to do next. And Amelia says it is acceptable to socialists because it generates the problems that will ultimately lead to them getting their Marxist utopia. So they find it to be completely acceptable because the sacrifices that they are making in the course of destabilizing the system and attacking capitalism are completely acceptable losses, because they believe that when they usher in utopia, they are saving more lives and they are making the world a better place for everyone. These are not irrational people. You might not agree with their ideas, but to dismiss them as irrational is allowing them to win. Well, bro, I'm very, very sorry to tell you that as of right now, you have given me absolutely zero indication that you understand what you're talking about, because you came in calling them irrational when there is no evidence, none, that they behave irrationally. You came in and showed us right off the bat that you don't understand what their goals are. So I'm going to suggest, Marcelo, you're welcome to stay here, but maybe we want to open our ears and talk a little less. And if you say things in the chat that I think need to be corrected to achieve a greater understanding for everyone, I'm going to do that. But this is about understanding these people, and I really don't think you actually understand what you're talking about yet. Oh, yeah, bro, you're doing real great in Cuba. Oh, yeah, you guys are doing real great. You got that problem under control. Totes, bro. Totes. Why don't we stop talking, start listening, and now we're going to go back to it. And if you're disruptive in my chat from here on forward because you're existing in your feelings, well, you're losing the fight in Cuba every single day because you don't understand what you're fighting. If you're going to exist in your feelings and whine in my chat, you're not going to be here for very long. The choice is entirely yours.
How to reduce microaggressions in interpersonal relationships, how to better represent diverse identities, how to educate away individual prejudices, and how to stop right-wing extremism. So it seemed to me that liberals had substituted one definition of racism for another. Instead of the kind of macroaggressions of police, of prisons, of border infrastructures, they were focusing on the microaggressions of individual biases. So the starting point for the book is that we need to distinguish actually between two quite different...
Hang on. Suspicious Bird says, it's difficult for me to believe that these people find destabilizing entire societies really care about people's welfare. Okay. We're not going to be allowing National Socialists in our chat, bro. I'm sorry. I just banned someone who said they're a National Socialist. No. That's not allowed here. If you believe that a Marxist utopia, and they really do believe that Marxism is going to be a utopia, okay, I can see I'm going to spend a lot of time arguing with the chat today. That's going to be fine. If this is a game you guys want to play, I'm happy to play it. If you really believe that a Marxist utopia is the ultimate greater good for all of humanity, and in order to get to your Marxist utopia, you need to destabilize the current system so that you can overthrow the current system to get to the Marxist utopia that is going to be the greater good for all of humanity, then destabilizing the system is a feature. It is not a bug. They are willing to sacrifice people. They are willing to sacrifice businesses. They don't believe private business should exist. So if you don't believe private business should exist, it's not going to be a problem for you to sacrifice private business because you do not believe that private business should exist. If you think that the Marxist utopia is going to be better for everyone overall, then you are going to have no problem doing what you need to do to destabilize the current system. And by the way, they believe the current system is literally killing people. So why wouldn't they destabilize the current system? And why wouldn't they go after the people who are upholding the current system? You guys have got to learn how to step outside of yourself and look at things from other people's perspectives. Other people do not. Bro, I am literally fucking married to a Ukrainian. Don't fucking tell me. My husband was living in Ukraine when the USSR was still a thing. So don't come in here with this bullshit and act like you know what's going on and you are the only one who knows what's going on, because you will quickly be escorted right out of this chat if you're going to come in here and whine and complain and cry. You might have good things to add, but your pompous bullshit is not helpful. We are here to learn, guys. We are here to learn what these people think, what they're planning, what they're doing. I have 2 rules in my chat. Number 1, don't be a dick. That means you will not insult me. You will not insult other people in the chat. I can do whatever I want to do because this is my house. You're in my house right now. So you don't get to come in and tell me what to do, but do I get to tell you what to do in my house? Oh, you're sure as shit right I do. Number 2 rule is no whining. If I tell you to stop doing something, you will stop doing it or you will be quickly exited out of my chat because I don't have any time to take care of your feelings. You can have all the feelings you want, you can whine all you want, but you cannot do it here. This is a place for learning about what these people believe. And anytime you guys come in and you try to gaslight people because you're having feelings in the chat, you are detracting from what the point is. Let's see. Let me just go back. All right. Let's continue. All right, Marcelo's getting his first time out. Marcelo, if you don't stop whining, bro, you won't be here. We don't need you here.
Anti-racist traditions, one liberal and one more radical. That's my daughter, by the way. He's heckling me there. So the liberal tradition sees racism as essentially a matter of irrational beliefs and attitudes, right? Its founders, such as the anthropologist Ruth Benedict and the gay rights pioneer Magnus Hirschfeld, they were interested in understanding the rise of Nazism in the 1930s, and they concluded that in societies where there were widespread racial prejudices, liberal democracy could be undermined by political extremists inflaming race hatred to gain power. And to remove this danger, they called on the liberal establishment to persuade the masses, especially the poor and the uneducated, that racist opinions have no legitimate basis. And this approach remains the core of liberal anti-racism today. You see it in the diversity training, which is a $4.3 billion business in the United States, to the idea that if we just get better representation in Hollywood movies, then that's going to educate us out of our biases. The difference now, the only difference from how this looked 100 years ago is that liberals now think about this as an unconscious bias problem as much as a conscious bias problem, right? Now, the radical tradition, on the other hand, sees racism as a matter of how resources are distributed differently across racial groups. So, for example, in a 1938 article by C.L.I. James, he talks about...
Hang on, Peter has a King Peter of the chat has a question. Welcome back, Peter. I haven't seen you in a minute. I hope you're well. Carlin, is the outer school that is socialist irrational, the useful idiots? Legit question. I'm not sure. Well, useful idiots don't realize that they're following socialism is the thing. Like anyone who is a declared socialist, a declared Marxist, I don't think those people are useful idiots. those people are true believers. Like if you're declaring yourself to be a socialist or a Marxist, you have probably read a metric ton of Marx, you've hung out with a metric ton of Marxists, like you're in that whole subculture, and they do have their own subculture. So I don't think that those people are useful idiots. I think the useful idiots are more like the it's like the people who buy into the left ideology, but they don't know that it's socialism. It's like public school teachers. Public school teachers are a great example. There are a lot of public school teachers who are quite literally teaching Marxism that have no idea they're teaching Marxism because they're teaching what they were taught in the colleges of education, which had been completely infiltrated and taken over, but they have no idea where it comes from and they never actually looked into it. Are those people irrational? Those people don't know what they're promoting. So in some ways, yeah, they are irrational because they haven't taken the time to actually look into it. But no, I don't think useful idiots are not who I'm talking about in this regard. Useful idiots are people who can be woken up. I think we should be waking up useful idiots. Useful idiots are doing what they believe they need to do in order to be good people. Thanks for the question, Peter. Appreciate it.
Racism in Africa. He's arguing that British colonial racism was not a set of beliefs or attitudes, but a structure of generally observed social rules and policies that enable economic exploitation. Individual racist attitudes no doubt existed, but were not the decisive factor. Likewise, Frans Fanon argued in 1956 that we should abandon...
Well, so Peter says Rose socialists don't believe in violent revolution. I mean, most of the tactics that socialists use aren't violent. The vast majority of tactics they use are not violent. They're destabilizing the system in a number of ways that are not violent at all. They're destabilizing the system through law. They're destabilizing the system through education. They're destabilizing the system through policy. Like, the riots in 2020 were a tiny, 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 tiny drop in the bucket of the ways in which these people are destabilizing the system. Most of the time, how they destabilize the system is they get themselves into positions of power, either legitimate positions of power, jobs that they've gotten, things they've been elected to, things like that, or they use the soft power of influence, which is often called illegitimate power, but it's actually much more powerful at the end of the day. They use nonviolent means all the time to get themselves into positions of power and then implement laws and policies and practices, and even protesting. It's in protesting for the sake of protesting, holding a sign and shouting. Protesting itself is not violent. Like, if you're burning something down, that's violence. If you're beating someone up, that's violence. But like going out and doing marches, that's nonviolent protest. So I don't think, like, the vast majority of their tactics are not violent, and that's actually what makes them so insidious.
abandoned the habit of what he called regarding racism as a disposition of the mind, a psychological flaw. Rather, he says, military and economic oppression most frequently precedes, makes possible, and legitimates racist beliefs. And this systematic oppression of a people can continue even if a majority of citizens do not have racist biases, unconsciously held or otherwise. So radical anti-racists argue that the only way to fight this...
Hang on, we're getting so many good... We're not even talking about this is what I love. We're not even talking about the presentation because there are so many good comments in the chat. We've got Tayton here who says, the way they destabilize is by words. We may share the same words, but we do not share the same dictionary, so their words are not what you think. That is absolutely correct. Corrupting the language is one of the key ways that these people are destabilizing the system. They speak in code. So the words... And this presentation is actually a great example of this. Anti-racism, the term anti-racism is designed to make you think that they're talking about skin color, but they're literally not. They're saying in the presentation being anti-racist means being anti-capitalist. They're not talking about skin color, they're talking about capitalism. So they're using the dictionary to destabilize things. Thank you, Tayton, for that, but I also want to highlight Julie. Julie says, there is absolutely no way everyone would be equal under socialism. Everyone would be equal, but some would be more equal than others. Well, Julie, socialists don't believe in equality. They literally don't believe in it. What do socialists believe, guys? This is actually another shirt in the Subversive series. Let me show you this shirt. Hang on. What do socialists believe? They don't believe in equality. They believe in fish addict. They believe in equity. That's exactly right. This is another shirt that I made in the Subversive series over on Unwoke Art. Equity means unequal. Equity is purposefully unequal because equity is designed to normalize outcomes. Therefore, the distribution of resources under equity is going to be inherently unequal. Karl Marx said, from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. That is an inherently unequal distribution of resources. And if you want to teach people that, you can get the shirt over on unwokeart.com. Great comments, guys. Please keep them coming. And yeah, Julie, I know you were responding to someone else, but I wanted to take the opportunity to teach people a thing or two. So I appreciate you giving me that opportunity.
Oppression is to build autonomous organizations with the power to dismantle our existing social systems and to build new ones. To them, racism is closely connected to capitalism. This is partly because racism weakens class struggle by dividing white workers from most of the world's working people. But more fundamentally, race provides a means by which capitalism can more intensively exploit certain categories of worker, the enslaved, the indentured, colonized peasantries, migrant workers, and so on, as well as justified discarding peoples who are deemed superfluous to the economy. So the book tells the story of these two different traditions of anti-racism through the 20th century. And I argue that while liberal anti-racism has given us some measure of progress in terms of interpersonal relationships over the last few decades, in the era of neoliberalism, it's become powerless against the kind of new structures of racism that have been erected. Now, to understand that, we need to begin by thinking about the limitations of the prevailing story of neoliberalism that the white left tends to tell itself. So in the British version of that story, we begin with...
When they say white left, what do they mean? Every time he says white left, is he referring to white people? What does he actually mean? No, he doesn't mean liberals. A lot of you are saying liberals. He doesn't, and I understand why you're saying that. So, yes. But not just property, a specific kind of property, right? Capitalists. They believe, no, capitalists. They believe the bourgeois of it, the bougies of any color, exactly. Capitalists. Anytime you guys, you really got to get this in your heads, and you are the one that has to self-teach this, right? Every single time you hear a socialist say the term white, they are not talking about your skin color. They are talking about capitalism, private property, the bourgeois, the property owner, the business owner, the landlord. That's what they're talking about every single time. When he says white, he means capitalists.
The achievements of the 1945 Labour government. How finally, after a long struggle, we were able to create a cradle-to-grave system of welfare to enable us to live in dignity with waged work for everyone, an income in retirement, universal education, housing, and healthcare, and so on. And then the story goes that our ruling class was able to take advantage of the crises of the 1970s to push back against this welfare state. Pinochet in Chile comes first, then Thatcher and Reagan. So the more egalitarian societies of the mid-20th century then give way to a kind of competitive culture in which the poor are held responsible for their own fate. Principles of social solidarity are shredded, and every aspect of life.
Hang on, illustration station. I appreciate the sentiment. Fuck all, Carlin. You need a university professorship. If only there were not some captured by Marx as well. I'm gonna give you a white pill illustration station. I teach more people every single day on the internet than I would ever teach in a university professorship. I get to teach hundreds of thousands of people every single month on the internet. And you guys can help me teach more people by getting more people to come to Socialism Saturday, by sharing clips, by sharing my articles that I do over on my Substack, by getting subscribed to my Substack, getting my emails, forwarding them on to your friends, because I'm only going to give you useful information, I promise. So I get to teach so many more people than I would ever be able to teach at a university. How great is that? And you guys get to take advantage of it for free. And you get to help me recruit more people by sharing my work, by getting it out there. And I really do appreciate it.
Life is subjected to the logic of market competition, from democracy to dating. So this story implies that the task today for the left is to reverse this neoliberal transformation of the last 50 years. And something like this story has been central, I think, to the movements around Jeremy Corbyn here in the UK and Bernie Sanders in the US. And it's a good story, but it's a partial story. And it leaves out how the neoliberal project involved the creation of new and distinctive forms of racist and neo-colonial domination. The impetus for the neoliberal turn came as much from decolonization in the Third World and black struggle in the United States as from the white left in the West. Neoliberals, in fact, saw organized labor in the West and anti-colonial nationalism elsewhere as equivalent and related threats. As Lionel Robbins, one of the original cohort of neoliberal thinkers, put it, the mines for the miners and Papua for the Papuans are analytically similar slogans. And as neoliberal think tanks, politicians, and intellectuals gained political influence, they worked with Western governments to configure new global and domestic racial boundaries to replace the older ones that had been weakened by decolonization and the Black freedom movement. Racism today is not, as commonly conceived, some kind of hangover from the past, some kind of legacy of the past, but an infrastructure of oppression generated over the last half century by neoliberalism's reconfiguring of these older structures. This happened because neoliberal intellectuals were deeply focused upon the cultural conditions that they thought were necessary to get people to follow the impositions of market discipline without having to be continuously coerced to do so.
Thank you, Noah. I appreciate it.
They understood that so-called free markets depend on whether people are willing to pursue their desires through market mechanisms and accept the distribution of resources that markets generate.
He's about to attack free markets, by the way. Let's pay attention for that. I want to thank Noah N for the super chat. Noah says both Marx and Hitler says Jews are synonymous for capitalism. Well, would that really surprise anyone? I think that sounds about right. And then Rottweiler says, it's fun asking Marxists, how can the redistribution of wealth and abolition of private property be enforced without empowering the state/party or agitators/red guards? Their rationalizations are amusing. Autumn is our resident socialist for people who don't know. Autumn, how can the redistribution of wealth and the abolition of private property be enforced without empowering the state or the agitators? Let us know your answer in the chat, Autumn. We'll look forward to that. But yeah, the socialists will often call themselves anarchists. They're not really anarchists. Socialists will say that they want to abolish the state. They don't really want to abolish the state. Socialists want to control the state. They want to be the ones in power. And they might call it something different, but ultimately, they want to be the ones deciding what your job is and where you live and how much food you get, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They want to be responsible for the distribution of resources. Thank you, Rottweiler. Appreciate it.
That willingness or lack of it is a matter of cultural values. And neoliberal intellectuals were deeply anxious about whether those cultural values extended outside of the West. As the neoliberal project unfolded, it became clear that vast swathes of humanity would not be easily incorporated into the market order being built. Neoliberalism generated large populations of people up.
Well, hang on. So Kenneth says, just to be clear, Marx was Jewish. Well, Nick Fuentes is Latino, okay?
Rooted from pre-existing livelihoods, but unable to be absorbed into neoliberal labor markets. These populations, deemed surplus to neoliberal markets, are what Cameroonian theorist Achille Mbembe calls the abandoned subjects. They are hardly needed at all by capitalism. For those populations deemed surplus, neoliberalism had to be imposed by force. Thus, the world the neoliberals wished to create could only be brought into existence and maintained through border violence, military violence, economic violence on a colossal scale. And within the terms of their philosophy, this violence could only be justified by presenting other cultures as by nature deficient. The more neoliberalism did not receive universal consent, the more neoliberals relied upon racist ideas of culture to manage their anxieties, organize their proposals, and legitimize their aggression. It's these surplus populations, both inside and outside the West, who are the targets of the new infrastructures of violence that neoliberalism has generated. It's they who make up the tens of thousands who fled the destruction of their countries only to suffer the death by policy of drowning in the Mediterranean. It's this same disposable humanity who's been slaughtered on an industrial scale in the global wars on terror and drugs. For example, with an estimated 3.6 million indirect deaths in the post 9/11 war zones of Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen. Within the UK, police violence is directed most often at our own abandoned and disproportionately black populations. In the United States, as Ruthie has demonstrated, mass incarceration is linked to the need to manage surplus populations, resources, and land. It's not coincidental that the think tank networks that have...
Hang on. I just want to point something out for everyone who believes that these people are in favor of depopulation, which is, these people don't care about depopulation, by the way. It's the world elites who are not Marxists. Klaus Schwab is not a Marxist. These people don't care about depopulation. That's a right-wing talking point, not a left-wing one. And this guy just gave us proof because he just said these people believe in prison abolition, right? This is actually an area where I have some agreement with them, by the way. You might not agree with me, but I actually do think the prison industrial complex is toxic and should be abolished. I would be completely fine with defunding the police. I think the police are a roving gang. And I know there are going to be people who disagree with me, and that's fine. But what he just said is that the prisons are to manage surplus population and resources. No, they don't. No, they do not. Marxists do not say depopulation. In fact, Marxists, the real ones, are afraid that conservatives are going to depopulate the world through eugenics. So you're just revealing that you don't actually listen to them, bro. They do not say that. And in fact, this person just literally said the opposite, which is that the prison industrial complex that he wants to abolish is only around to manage surplus populations. Don't make shit up in my chat and not be expected to be called out. We believe in nuance here, and we believe in reality, and we believe in receipts. And no, we're not going to get into another round of does the left want to depopulate the world, because I have yet to see one single shred of evidence that any of these people actually talk about that. It does have to do with depopulation, bro. You're just not smart enough to understand how. If you want to stop talking and open your ears, perhaps you'll learn. Managing surplus populations for them is not a positive thing. They're using it to attack the prison industrial complex to abolish it. Rottweiler, thank you for the super chat. Exactly. Even if there's a really small overlap between Marxists and Malthusians, depopulation isn't an argument made by Marxists. Marxists don't like Klaus Schwab and the WEF. This is a problem that conservatives have, because conservatives don't believe in nuance and don't actually listen to what people say. The WEF is not Marxist. They're two completely different things. The WEF and Klaus Schwab, by the way, doesn't care if you're on the right or the left. They don't consider themselves to be on the right or the left. They believe that they are above everything. These are not the same groups. When you conflate people's ideas, that only means you don't understand them, which is why you lose.
Land. It's not coincidental that the think tank networks that have been central to promoting neoliberal economics have typically also been the key mobilizers of projects of racist policing, incarceration, and counterterrorism. It wasn't simply that racism became more subtle or went unconscious after its overt forms had been defeated. It was more that there was no longer a need to routinely make explicit assertions of racial superiority. Racial inequalities were reproduced through neoliberalism's market systems alongside newly intensifying infrastructures of violence carried out in the name of seemingly race-neutral concerns about crime, migration, and terrorism.
Hang on. Why do people conflate socialists with the WEF? Because conservative influencers do not properly educate their audiences about what's going on in the world, and socialist influencers don't actually understand that they're different. And, conservative influencers, I think I might have said so. Let me start again. Why do people conflate socialists and the WEF? Because conservative influencers do not properly educate their audiences about what's going on in the world, and conservative influencers don't actually understand the difference. For the most part, there may be people here and there. And so conservative influencers lie to their audiences by ignorance because they themselves have not bothered to understand the differences in the populations and who they are and what they believe. And so then their audiences come away believing one thing is true, even though it has no basis in reality at all, because they are listening to people who lie to them. And yes, I am absolutely smarter than most people talking on the internet today. I am smarter than most of the people who are commentating on this subject. And the reason that I'm smarter than most people commentating on this subject today is I have watched more real socialist activist content than almost anyone else on the damn internet. I have watched more than Glenn Beck. I have watched more than Mark Levin. I have watched more than Turning Point USA and all their influencers. I have watched more than than every single conservative politician in Congress today. And so has most of my audience. So yes, we are all smarter than anyone you're listening to. And the thing of it is, bro, you don't know how stupid you look to us. You don't. It's like we are in an advanced college level course and you're fucking around in kindergarten and the first grade. That's how you look to us. So I would recommend that you stop talking and start listening. Am I smarter than James Lindsay? No. He's got me. He's got me by a long shot. The difference between James Lindsay and I is James Lindsay reads the academic literature, and God bless him for doing it, because I ain't doing that shit. I watch the content that they're teaching in the real world. I have watched significantly more of their real world trainings than James Lindsay has. James Lindsay has dwarfed me multi times over in the reading of their content. But I'll tell you this, Peter, James Lindsay and I agree on almost everything. Not everything, but almost everything. Because he and I are two of the people that have read and studied these people more than almost anyone else. And I would put James Lindsay's hardcore audience up there too. I think James Lindsay's hardcore audience is very, very, very smart. But he and I are doing fundamentally different things, and we still generally come to the same conclusion. Peter, King Peter, the chat says James Lindsay has been talking about WEF and Schwab. WEF is definitely critical theory centric. I wonder which is a bigger threat, critical theory or socialist. Well, I mean, socialists believe in critical theory. I think the WEF uses critical theory to advance their goals because they've seen how effective it is. But does the WEF actually believe in it? I don't think that they do. I think that, and he does way more work in this than I do because I'm wrapped up in the far left socialists. But what I think they do is use critical theory to advance their goals because they've seen how effective these people are at doing it. So they may be using it as a tool, but I don't actually think they believe in it. I could be wrong about that, but that's my theory. Hang on, just scrolling through the chat. I mean, I don't mind saying that James Lindsay is much smarter than me. Because he is. James Lindsay is the king. He is incomparable. Everyone should listen to him. I don't listen to him that much because I don't want to be influenced by his ideas. I want to come to my own conclusions, but I have absolutely no problem calling James Lindsay the king of this material because he was the one screaming about this when most of us didn't know what was going on. I will shit talk a lot of people. He is not one of the people I will shit talk.
Liberal notions of diversity and inclusion are completely compatible with these forms of racist structural violence. White liberals can heroically confront their own unconscious biases all they want, yet these structures will remain. Liberal anti-racists demand we use the correct racial vocabulary, but abolishing a word does not abolish the social forces it expresses. They implement diversity training programs, but these fail owing to the mistaken premise that racism now resides primarily in the unconscious mind. And they talk of hate speech and hate crimes on the assumption that oppressive cruelty is the behavioral expression of a hateful.
I mean, I would be open to it, but like, let him know, I guess. Like, I'm not going to initiate that, but if he wants to talk, I'd be more than happy to talk. Of course, I would do it live. I would have no problem doing that, but I don't know what road James Lindsay's been going down lately because I don't pay attention to his content. And it's not a lack of respect. It's that I don't want to be influenced by his ideas. I want to come to my own conclusions. And so I kind of block out people that are talking and thinking about the same things because I want to check back in with them later. Oh, we believe the same thing. Okay. You know?
Full disposition, ignoring the corporate executives, asset managers, lawmakers, government officials, judges, police officers, prison guards, military personnel, and immigration officers who, without attitudes of hatred, routinely and calmly operate infrastructures of racist violence in the name of security and profit. By reducing racism to the unconscious mind, to the use of inappropriate words, and to the extremist fringes, liberal anti-racists end up absolving the institutions most responsible for racist practices. They are effective at getting more people of color into senior jobs in police forces, border agencies, and the military, but unable to get fewer.
Bro, if you keep disrupting my chat, you're not going to be here for very long. No one cares that you were born white. Literally no one cares. Whiteness is not about your skin color. Whiteness is about capitalism.
People of color killed by those same agencies. To be anti-racist today means working collectively with organizations to dismantle those racist border, policing, carceral, and military infrastructures. It means organizing in the community to get the police out of our schools, taking direct action against deportations, confronting the corporations that trade in colonial violence in Palestine. It means understanding that the poor of the global South are as equally entitled to the world's resources.
You're way too smart, Carlin. You are losing thousands of viewers trying to understand your message, and it changes every minute. My message is one of the most consistent messages on the internet, asshole. I've literally been saying the same fucking thing for 3 fucking years. And here's the problem. You want to know why I lose subscribers? Because they're not smart enough to understand my content. That's the truth. They're not smart enough to understand it. They just want to be entertained. You're not going to be entertained on this channel. You're going to come here to learn. Nope, that's not what we do. Because I don't want people like that around. You so far have offered nothing but trolling in my chat. I've let it go. But you want to be like, you're losing thousands of subscribers. I teach thousands of people every single week about socialism, the real stuff, not the bullshit that you think is real, but because you cannot even begin to understand the real stuff. I have no problem losing tens of thousands of subscribers overnight because I know that most of them are going to be low IQ idiots who are going to do nothing of value in the real world and aren't smart enough to understand the ideas we're talking about anyway. So stop trolling in my chat. If you keep doing it, you're going to be removed, and then I will have lost another subscriber, and I won't really care at all. Facts don't care about your feelings. It's just going to be one of those types of nights. Really. If you're calling someone too smart, you may not be smart enough to understand. Nope. I'm saying that they speak. Bro, you really need to stop talking and start listening. If you are here to learn, then you need to stop talking and start listening. And if you're not here to learn, then you don't need to be here anymore. Oh, look at you. You just got banned. And this is an example of what I mean when I say there are low IQ morons that are simply not smart enough to understand what's going on. Goodbye.
As the wealthy residents of the North. In the end, it requires us to build an economy of care, not killing, uplifting all working classes of whatever colour. And in fighting for that, we're going to have to confront not just external forces, but also what lies within ourselves. Capitalism keeps pushing us to compete with each other, to trample over each other to get a few more crumbs. It breaks our hearts every day. It hardens us. It makes us less human. But we're not going to heal ourselves by turning inward and attending to the uniqueness of our pain, or by searching for some truth about who we are. We heal ourselves through joining in struggle. When we come together in movements, there's deep love, there's deep joy, because we're able to feel human. We come to understand that my happiness is bound up with.
I am well aware that you don't know this information, but if you are new here and you don't know, the proper thing to do is to listen and learn. You are going to learn this stuff by osmosis. Listen, guys, if you are new here and you are confused and you don't know what they're saying, we were all there at one point. And there are plenty of people here that will teach you, okay? But trolling is not going to be the way that you're going to get people to teach you. The reality is that on Socialism Saturday, you are getting thrown into the deep end of the pool. And if you haven't been to a Socialism Saturday before, these people speak in code. It is hard to understand when you haven't listened to it before. You just need to lean into it. It's like going to France to learn French. You aren't going to understand everything at first, but if you just lean into it, you are going to learn more and more and more. Ask questions in the chat. Don't be a troll. Ask questions. If you don't know what something means, there's no shame in it because we were all there once. I have learned to speak socialist live on the internet by watching socialist content with an audience. My audience has learned to speak socialist by watching socialist content. So there's no shame in not knowing. We don't expect everyone to know. Just don't be a troll. Ask questions. Accept the fact that there are things that you aren't going to understand, and we will do our very best to help you understand them. Okay? Fair enough?
With yours, that I can only be whole if everyone else is whole, that my growth depends on our collective growth. In the words of Gwendolyn Brooks, we are each other's harvest, we are each other's business, we are each other's magnitude and bond. Identity is not a truth inside you waiting to be discovered. It's a creation, not a discovery. It's what you create with others. You are what you do with others. There's always going to be disagreements in our movements, but those disagreements become a source of fracture when your movement is failing to influence events. Then you tend to turn inwards and fight each other. But when you're influencing events, the internal disagreements are not the main focus and can be allowed to take their natural course rather than be exaggerated. And these are all the lessons of our deep and long histories of people's movements. This is how we overthrew European colonialism and redrew the map of the world. Then we came to Britain and we had to fight again. We rose up against the police, against the immigration laws, against all the forces that were killing us. That's the history upon which we stand as we continue to fight. The history that tells us that anti-racism does not fragment class struggle, but radicalizes it. That culture is not a distraction from economic struggles, nor a fixed identity that determines who we are, but it's what we make and renew through our struggles for working people. And because our struggles are unbounded, so is our sense of who we might be. Thank you.
Okay, we are an hour and a half into the stream and 15 minutes into the presentation because I've been talking so much. Now, for people who are new, usually what happens at these presentations is there is a set of prepared remarks. We just saw some prepared remarks. The prepared remarks don't tell us anything, because they're usually prepared. They usually don't say anything crazy in those remarks. Next, they're going to get into a panel discussion where they're not going to be as scripted and but they probably know what questions are going to be asked and they've planned out the answers. So again, it's one of those things where they might say something, they might not. We have to listen and find out. What we are really listening for in every single socialist presentation that we watch is the question and answer portion, because they never know what questions are going to come out of the crowd. They are completely unprepared for it. They don't have scripted remarks prepared for it. And that's the best part usually, because it's where they say the quiet part out loud.
I can't do two things at once. All right, here we go.
Oh no, now Ruth is going to get up and talk.
Good evening.
Prepared remarks.
Good. It's lovely to be here. I want to thank our sponsors, the ISRF, my old friend Chris Newfield, new friends, Lars Stewart, and others at the Institute for hosting, and my very old, very dear friends at the Institute for Race Relations for co-sponsoring, and my new friend, John, Dr. John. Some of my earliest work was published in Race and Class. And I will tell you, this wasn't like an easy thing to do, to break into those pages. The first thing I ever sent to Sivananda, he hated so thoroughly. And he yelled at me so long. And then at the end, he said, "Ruth, have I hurt you?" I said, "Sort of." He said, "Well, send me something else." And I did. All right. I am delighted to talk this evening about Arun's splendid book. And as you could already tell from his comments and from Chris's lovely introduction, it's got an amazing sweep. And its sweep enables us to extend the sweep. So later in my comments, I'll talk about that a little bit. So in the context of the global maldistribution of material and symbolic resources, quoting Stuart Hall, this book, Arun's book, takes up urgent categories of analysis, and by showing us many ways, by showing us in many ways how every determination is also a negation, it insists we make our way by making ways, theoretically and practically, quote, into anti-racism that does not fragment class struggle, but radicalizes it. So that's the last few words of the entire book.
Hang
Arun
on.
shared the words.
I want to go back to what she just said, or the last words of the book. They want to work their way into an anti-racism that does not something class struggle, but radicalize it. What exactly did she say?
Theoretically and practically, quote, into anti-racism that does not fragment class struggle, but radicalizes it.
That does not fragment class. They want to create anti-racism that does not fragment class struggle, but radicalizes it. This, guys, is all the proof you need that anytime you hear the term anti-racist, as in Ibram X. Kendi, how to be an anti-racist, that's Marxism. Anti-racism is Marxism, because they're saying their specific goal is to exploit anti-racism, so not to fragment the class struggle, but to radicalize the class struggle. Anytime you hear these people talking about class struggle, that's Marxism. And what they do is they use things like race, like gender, like sexual orientation, like gender identity, in order to destabilize the system by causing problems, by getting people to fight each other rather than fighting them. They use things like critical race theory, critical gender studies, critical queer theory, queer Marxism, etc., 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 in order to radicalize the class struggle. Well, again, you need to listen because they're saying it on the screen right in front of you. Critical race theory is just a way to use anti-racism to radicalize the class struggle. Queer studies, anything related to the term queer, is just a way to use to basically hijack the LGBT movement to radicalize the class struggle. These are all just tools in their toolboxes. Well, I'm not the one saying it. The literal people writing the books about it are saying it. And then I'm slowly repeating it so that people like you who aren't listening understand what they are saying. God, where did all these people in my chat come from today that, like, I don't mind new people being here, but, like, for the new people in my chat, where did you come from and why are you here? Because it seems like you're more interested in arguing with me than actually learning what's going on. So let me know in the chat what you actually expect this to be, because I'm going to do the same thing I do every Saturday for the and have been doing for the last year. And I'm going to teach people, but I'm having a hard time understanding why people in the chat are more interested in arguing with me than they are with understanding what's actually going on in the world.
So that's the last few words of the entire book. Arun shared the words with you. I'm sharing them again. Those closing words are both theme and imperative of many movements and thinkers with whom we think this evening, exploring the conviviality of politics and of becoming, as we dare to claim radical universalism as and drawing from futures for which we fight tirelessly by rearranging the present. So futures for which we fight tirelessly by rearranging the present. Arun's book works through many contradictions, most vividly expressed as liberalism versus anti-capitalism, as individual versus structure, but also white and not white, colonial and decolonial, and so forth. I'm just excited to discuss some of these themes this evening with Arun and all of you who came out to engage in our debate. As many of you know, I have come to think the dynamics of racial capitalism through the co-constitutive processes of organized abandonment and organized violence.
Okay.
In order to think.
What is radical universalism? So I don't know for sure, but I do know the term targeted universalism. The term targeted universalism is something that comes out of an institute at UC Berkeley that is being implemented in K through 12 schools all over the country. And targeted universalism is code word for equity. So I'm going to make a guess, and it's like it's not completely educated, but it's coming from somewhere, that anytime they use the term universalism, what they really mean is equity, and they're just saying it in a different way, but functionally it's the same thing. Let me know if that rings true for you guys, and we might find out differently, and if we do, that's fine, but that would be my best guess.
Class struggle, as Arun concludes, a broad dynamic of processes, internally contradictory, but not necessarily antagonistically so. And I don't know how many of you here are old enough to remember when all of a sudden it seemed in the 1980s, we were all talking about antagonistic and non-antagonistic contradictions. And it was such a liberating moment to think that way. Every point of contact is...
Marcelo, you have been whining in my chat from the beginning. You've never attended a Socialism Saturday before. And again, as I told you earlier, my husband grew up in the USSR. So don't tell me that you are the only oppressed person that has experience with socialism. You're getting one more time out because you're continuing to whine in my chat. The next time you come into my chat and whine, you're just going to be blocked and you won't get to participate anymore. The choice is entirely up to you. But I've had it.
It's a site for struggle, not a topic for endless complaint. This is where abolition starts, as life in rehearsal. Abolition requires we change just one thing, everything. And the title of that book that's endlessly delayed is just called Change Everything. It's not called This Changes Everything, it's just Change Everything. Abolition exists already in practices and experiments in many contexts, meaning it is by materialist necessity made of what is, as well as making new or renewed relations. So it's innovative and it also infiltrates frequently. Centrally in Arun's book, the clash between facts and values explodes over and over again.
So Philosophist did us the service of looking up radical universalism, and apparently was not what I thought it was. Radical universalism would hold that culture is irrelevant to the validity of moral rights or rules, which are universally valid. All right, fair enough. I actually don't disagree with that. Let's see where they're going with it, though. That's always really the important part.
Again, what do I mean? I mean, of course, the difference between whatever accumulation of empirical evidence one gathers as an organizer, as an exhorter, as a scholar or other actor, and what one can make of such evidence by thinking together with comrades in the world as we encounter one another, and by thinking with comrades distant and departed, whose observations and insights help to guide our own as thought action breaks into other forms of thought action, organizing, promoting ideas, and bargaining in the political arena. Those we think with, often by name, M.N. Roy, Claudia Jones, Cedric Robinson, Stuart Hall.
Exactly, Bobby.
Alameen,
exactly. A good Legend of Billie
Siva,
Jean quote.
Frequently appear to us as individual innovators rather than as collectively produced exemplars of thought in process. And I'll talk about myself here. I'm frequently cited and sometimes feel like I've become a meme machine, rather than what I think I actually am, which is somebody who is continually working through theory and practice as it is becoming, in part by looking at how it became. So subjectivity and objectivity are always meaningful. And I was thinking, as an example from Arun's book, that notably Arun mentions, and many others have mentioned over time, that Fanon in Wretched of the Earth puts a bright spotlight on peasants. And many people come away thinking, okay, peasants are going to solve everything, as though peasants were undifferentiated. And of course, Fanon knew better. And his thinking about peasants brings to mind, for example, M.N. Roy's interlocutor and sparring partner, Lenin's extensive writing and thinking about peasants. And that makes me think about how Lenin came to think about peasants. I mean, he was kind of an urban guy. His dad was a school teacher. And what the range of thinking peasants became, for example, in the thought that turned into those debates by 1920 and beyond, and how much other history, for example, the history of Haiti and the history of the many insurgencies in the Americas, across the Americas, shaped Lenin as well as shaping Marx and shaping others. So there are entire histories that matter. And what's interesting in the struggle today against liberal anti-racism and within neoliberalism is the differentiated appeal to history, as though history were statically available to solve any contemporary problem. Okay, next page. There are so many moments in Arun's book to raise, not as disagreement, except where I do disagree a little bit, but more to enhance our collective capacity to make theoretical interventions that arise from and break into action. So here I'm thinking in particular about how C.L.R. James, in writing that piece of his called Black Power, talked about then Stokely Carmichael and then H. Rap Brown. And he writes, quote, "So long and far-reaching a struggle had needed to know where it was, where it had come from, and where it was going. CLR raised the alarm that where it was going could well be into the jaws of criminalization and premature death." That was why he wrote that piece, in part, was to help preserve Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture's wife. And we do know what happened to Al-Amin so many decades later, right? But that particular possible future was already unrolling. And if we are attentive, we can think about these processes and vulnerabilities and urgencies in relation to so many individuals and movements around the planet today. And certainly criminalization is almost every government's favorite tactic. You go to South Africa, you go to Brazil, you go to India, you go to small countries, you go to big countries, criminalization is robust. So let's take a look at a few examples from Arun's text and think together about orienting energy in multiple paths toward universal goals. As Arun mentioned, he writes a lot about anti-racist history in the United States, liberal and radical anti-racist history. And he mentions in passing, for example, that during the Cold War, the US had a reputational issue to deal with because during the Cold War, many, many places around the planet were actively and intensively involved in decolonizing themselves. And the question was, would those newly independent places look to capitalism, the US, or to socialism, the Soviet Union?
Indeed.
Well, it is true the US had this reputational problem when it came to anti-Black racism and Jim Crow, but it also had.
Yasmin is asking a fair question. Abolishing the prison system is how they're going to destabilize the system. Carlin, how can't you see that? I'm not arguing that that abolishing the prison system should happen overnight, Yasmin. I just think that the prison system, and again, the prison industrial complex, is extremely corrupt. And I think there are a lot of innocent people in jail that don't deserve to be in jail. And I've known innocent people who have gone to jail for things they didn't do. And I think that the cops are a gang. I don't think they're any better than a gang. And so it's like one of those things where I'm sure I probably differ with the socialists about how to go about doing it. But in principle, I agree with them. There would have to be just, I don't know what the other strategies are, but I'm allowed to have an opinion too. And just because something might destabilize the system doesn't inherently make it socialist. Let's see. Rebecca, I think you're new here. I haven't seen you here before, so I'm going to take a moment to let you know that when they say white people, they don't actually mean skin color, they mean capitalism. What you're saying has no relation to what they're actually saying, so I'm just going to recommend that you sit back and learn and listen, and we will try to teach you as much as we can, but this is not about white skin color or black skin color. It has nothing to do with skin color at all. It has to do with capitalism, private property owners, the bourgeois, the bosses, the landlords, etc., etc., etc. I explained that earlier in the stream. You're welcome to go back and listen, or you can just hang out and ask questions when you have them. Let's see. Just scrolling through the chat, see if there's anything more I want to address right now. Guys, I'm really not going to get into a debate with you guys about how I feel about the prisons. I'm not going to get into the debate. So, and you can have all the feelings you want about not agreeing with me. I'm not getting into the debate.
A longstanding anxiety about a fifth column developing in the US among, for example, Black communists. And people like Esther Cooper Jackson, Pat Patterson, Dorothy Burnham, Charlene Mitchell, Howard Stress Johnson, many, many, many Black communists had been organizing for decades in urban and rural United States.
They use the term whiteness to mean capitalism because the rationalization that they gave is that racism was invented when the first slaves came to the United States in 1619, even though they didn't come here in 1619. The first slaves came to the United States in the 1500s, but they overlooked that because it's not convenient to their story. The explanation that the woke left has, and this comes out of the 1619 Project, is that racism was invented when the first Black slaves came to the United States in 1619 because before the white people brought Black slaves to the United States, white people did not exist until they brought Black slaves to the United States. Prior to white people existing, they were called English, Irish, French, etc., etc. They weren't referred to by being white. They were referred to by their country of origin. When they brought Black slaves to the United States, and I'm not saying I agree with this, I'm explaining the perspective. The white slave owners who did that had to differentiate themselves from the Black slaves, and so they started colloquially talking about themselves as being white. That's when white people were created. According to these people, racism did not exist until this moment. This is where they get the idea of systemic racism. Because what they say happened is when the newly crowned white people decided they were white instead of English or French or Irish, etc., 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 they started building systems that only supported white people. Therefore, the entire system the United States was built on is a system that only exists to support white people, keep white people in power, etc., etc. Now, what they really mean is that they considered slavery in the United States to be capitalism in action. So whiteness means capitalism because the white slave owners brought the Black slaves to the United States to support capitalism. And they also say that the police came from slavery because the police came from people who essentially were paid to collect runaway slaves. This is where the whole basis for the idea of systemic racism comes from. Okay, this is why they always try to connect race with capitalism. It's why they say whiteness to mean property owners, because the origin of it is literal slave ownership in the context that we're talking about here. All right. I know that's difficult to understand, but that is actually the logic behind it. What we need to know for our purposes is when they say whiteness, systemic racism, white supremacy, etc., they're not talking about your skin color because they're talking about private property ownership. Because slaves were considered to be private property. Other things are considered to be private property too. Your house is considered to be private property. Your business is considered to be private property. Your car is considered to be private property. Your children are considered to be private property according to these people. They want to abolish all of that. Does that make sense to everyone? Does everyone have any questions? I know I have a lot of new people here today. Let me know if there are any questions about what I just said. Rottweiler, thank you for the super chat. White people is a code for bourgeois. or the beneficiaries of capitalism. Not even Marcuse cared about race. He only tried to create a new proletariat in sexual and racial minorities to push Marxism. That's exactly correct. I know what I've just done is introduce a new concept for a lot of people because you've heard from so many people that when they say whiteness, they mean skin color. And I understand why you believe that. But what we're doing here is we're peeling back the layers and explaining more in depth where these ideas come from. Larry Elder is considered to be the black face of white supremacy. How would that even be possible if it was about skin color? Larry Elder is a very black man. They call black people white supremacists all the time. Byron Donalds, sitting congressman, was called a white supremacist when he ran for Speaker of the House. Well, how could he Byron Donalds is very black. Tim Scott, also very black, is considered to be a white supremacist. Why? Because all of these people believe in capitalism, believe in private property, and are considered to be part of the bourgeois class. That's where these ideas are coming from. And it's really important that we all understand this because they are changing the language to confuse you. No, socialists do not care about your skin color. Socialists care about whether or not you support capitalism. Socialists do not care if you're black or white or red or green or any color under the rainbow. They only care that you support capitalism. Socialists love white people who want socialism. Socialists hate black people who want capitalism. They do not care about your skin color in any way, shape, or form. Does anyone else have any questions? All right. If you have questions, please ask them in the chat. I will try to answer the best I can. And in the meantime, just remind yourself that every single time they say white people or whiteness, they mean capitalism.
Indeed, they were organizing for a world of sufficiency. We might call it Red Plenty, stealing Spofford's novel title, by figuring out.
And I just want to say, guys, if I come across as a little frustrated for having to explain this, it's not you. It's the fact that I literally have to explain this every single day of my life and have had to for like the past 2 years. And it just gets a little grating, okay? But I know there's a lot of new people in the chat. I don't want you to think I'm frustrated with new people. I just want you to keep in mind that I literally have to say the same thing over and over and over and over and over again until I'm blue in the face. And it just gets a little grating sometimes. That's it. But I'm happy to explain when people genuinely want to learn. And I do appreciate that there are so many new people here today.
What anti-racism actually was in practice. That's what Black communists were doing. FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover built his entire career and power base from 1919 forward by seeing red in Black liberation.
Sarah. Exactly.
Indeed, COINTELPRO was initiated in 1956, not 1967. Might be that error was fixed by the time the book was published. Anticipating rather than following Alameen and others in the mid-60s. The discussion of Claudia Jones, which is extremely deep and refreshing.
Oh, this is Akshay.
Lays out a
Akshay.
trajectory of so many different processes, including long-distance migration, including immigration, including criminalization, including deportation.
Hang on, we got a super chat from Trendlin. How do we get conservative pundits to learn that whiteness is capitalism? There are a lot of people that get this so wrong. Yo. My kingdom for Tim Pool fucking learning that whiteness means capitalism. Can we just start sending, I'm not going to do this because he won't read it, but like, can we just start sending Tim Pool super chats for those of you who watch Tim Pool? that says whiteness means capitalism? Can like, it's a $2 super chat. Can we just start like ambushing his fucking shows? With like, honestly, I would love for any conservative influencer to understand this concept, because it's so clear and it's so obvious to me. And it's like, I have to reteach every single audience member that they give incorrect information to. I would give my left foot for Tim Pool to learn and really understand that whiteness means capitalism. No, Peter, you sent him a $500 super chat that he'd ignored. You should never send that jackass money again. I felt really bad about that. But no, like, I would love, I have tried to teach them this, but I'm too inconvenient for them. So it is incumbent upon all of you, because I can't do this myself, guys. If you want your conservative influencers to learn that whiteness means capitalism, then start spamming their asses on the internet. Start spamming their fucking Twitters. Start spamming their messages. Start spamming their super chats, because literally the only thing these people learn from is a mob coming into their feed and like spamming them with information. And then eventually they're like, oh, maybe whiteness really does mean capitalism, and they think it's their idea. So if you want them to learn, that's the best answer I have, because I've tried. I really have.
You know, all of these features of the combination of organized abandonment and organized violence condense in any account of Claudia Jones's life. Indeed, some of the people in the greater community.
Hang on. Brian, we do not use the term anti-white on my channel. I haven't seen you here before, but we do not use that term. The term anti-white comes from white identitarians who are really toxic, bad people who I do not want to be associated with, and we do not use that term on this channel. If you are getting a warning now, if you use that term again on my channel, you will be blocked and you will not get a second chance.
Of Black communists in the United States and beyond, together, as Arun discusses in the book, put together an argument called We Charge Genocide, which took up a new term, genocide, then in 1951, a new term, to discuss long-term vulnerabilities. It gives us a view into, and if I had any slides,
it is
this
a
would be it.
subscriber-only chat. It is already.
It gives us a view into internationalist imperative, like imperative, forms of struggle, including propaganda, and anti-racism as anti-capitalism, right? So that piece sort of gives us this triangle. And within the triangle, again, if I had a slide, I would show you a picture. We see or can imagine the infrastructures people create and use always for reasons of that facts value slippage bearing excess significance. So whatever infrastructures we come up with or they come up with will always become.
Hank, thank you for the membership, Hank. It's good to see you again. Let's see. James Lindsay has never once explained this to Tim Pool. Tim Pool cannot even define critical race theory. So no, Tim does not understand what this is. I have made multiple videos showing people how Tim does not understand what this is, and Tim won't listen. So no, James Lindsay has not taught him this at all in any way.
Because of the slippage between facts and values, create or bear excess significance, which then becomes the material for not only the kinds of narratives that naturalize hunger and suffering and the wage relation, but also narratives that incite revolutionary struggle and activity. Surely, the multi-ethnic fascist rulers in the economic North attest to this point. The excess significance can be an impediment and it can be an opportunity. As history's protagonists move to conscious action, purposeful and potentially violent. And in the context of thinking about violence, all of the various violences that are the condition of possibility of us being together in this room tonight, in this building named as its name.
There is not a video explaining, well, there's actually probably several videos that explain why we don't use the term anti-white, but they were from a long time ago. But I will show you why. I will give you a resource because this is important for people who are new here. This is my Substack. This is carlin.substack.com. And I will pop this link in the chat. But if you go to the Substack and you search for this article, which is called The Backlash to Critical Race Theories Here, and they're trying to co-opt the anti-CRT movement, I will pop this link in the chat. This will explain to you where the term anti-white comes from. This will show you explicitly that there are groups of white identitarians, I'm talking white nationalists, real racists, the real ones, they're also anti-Semites that are trying and have tried to co-opt the anti-CRT movement to use it to recruit people to their little white identitarian cult. They explicitly use the term anti-white and work to get influencers to use the term anti-white because they believe that inserting the term anti-white into the cultural zeitgeist will help them recruit new members to their white identitarian movements. If you read that article, you will see all of the receipts. I have them on video saying this explicitly. And the reason that we do not use the term anti-white is because I spent months infiltrating these jackasses and doing investigative research on them to produce this article. And they have attacked and mobbed and terrorized me on multiple occasions. And I do not want them in this chat. I don't want them here. So if anyone, you're getting banned. Goodbye. But thank you, bro. I do want to thank you for proving that the people who are running that account are white identitarians. Thank you for that. I'm going to grab a screenshot of that message and of your profile. Because that person that was just here, that's a legitimate white identitarian. And that is why, guys, we don't use that term in the chat. I'm not joking about that. That person that I just blocked, legitimate white identitarian. Fun times. Beth, thank you for the super chat. This is for the incredible Bitch Fest Zoom this afternoon. Thank you, Beth. Thank you for allowing us a space to do this. I have learned and grown so much on this channel. Thank you, fearless leader and hail comrades. Thank you, Beth. We love you in the community. You are the only perpetual queen of the chat. Peter is the perpetual king of the chat. Beth is the perpetual queen of the chat. Thank you, guys. I really do appreciate it. All right, let's go back. We're like doing more commentary on other things today than we are watching the actual presentation, but that's all right. I feel like we've had some good talks today. It wasn't just that he had a Pepe avatar. That wasn't what it was. I don't mind people with Pepe avatars. I really don't. Like some of them are just having fun. They're having a good time. It's not about the Pepe avatar. There was something, my picture was actually in that avatar. I probably saw something you didn't see. A white identitarian is someone that only wants to associate with white people and wants to build a white ethno-state and doesn't want any non-white people involved in it. And they do not consider Jews to be white. Well, Jews aren't white. Jews are, their own ethnicity. But if someone is calling someone a Jew as an insult, as the white identity, it's ironic because like the white identitarians call me a Jew all the time. If you go on Gab, you'll see this. They really, 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 really don't like Jews. They really don't like non-white people, and they really don't like Jews. Can I be the court jester of the chat? Yes, Mark. If you would like the role of the court jester of the chat, you are welcome to be there. I do appreciate it.
aimed at this school named as it's named. So all of those violences. It's hard in that context to de-exceptionalize Nazi genocide from any perspective. I am not saying something normative that it should be.
I am very well aware.
I'm saying it's hard to do. Because attempts to do so can sometimes obscure fascism, which is ripe and growing. Fascism as ideology, system, and outcome with racism at its core. If the central categorical contrast here is liberal versus structural, we should sort through some particulars from points of view of history's protagonists. So as we know, and Arun just said, structures are residue of agency, individual agency and collective agency. And such coordinated agency is reproduced daily by those entrusted with their operation, daily. You know, I'm a teacher, I reproduce it every day. Reproduction materializes in the process of transformation. So a structure transforms something. It has internal rules and is both resistant to change, yet in various ways changes all the time because reproduction is necessarily differentiation. And if you doubt it, think about the fact that Arun told you his daughter is here. Reproduction is differentiation. I give you example. Complexity, as Arun argues, is an opportunity rather than an impediment, though frequently the best prepared to seize opportunities both embody and deepen the impediments, like Black cops. And the US now has many major cities run by mayors who are themselves Black cops. They came up from the street force, and their story, of
they
course,
really
is
don't
they
like
fought
them.
their way into the police force.
I want everyone to pay attention to this. They do not like Black cops. This is another example of like, this is not about skin color at all. They love everyone who agrees with their ideology. They do not like anyone who disagrees with their ideology. And I'll tell you what, Black cops to these people are considered to be like the ultimate effing traitor. Mark, you are welcome to say that you are a socialist. We do have socialists who watch Socialism Saturday. We really do. Anyone is welcome to watch Socialism Saturday. If you are a socialist, welcome. If you follow the rules of the chat, which are don't be a dick and no whining, don't listen to anything Autumn has to say. Autumn is our resident socialist. She comes to everything, and she also will lie about what's allowed here and what's not. But as long as you're cordial to everyone, dude, we're going to be cordial to you. We might even ask you questions about your ideas. But everyone's welcome here. So, you know, just don't be a dick. That's all I ask. Not too hard.
When nobody wanted them, and they rose through the ranks and eventually became electoral political actors, and are now the mayors of New York, formerly mayor of Chicago, and so on and so forth. This is a pattern. And it's a pattern further that we can see even in a recent decision by the Supreme Court of the United States banning affirmative action, except in the military. Except in the military. But even that was not an innovation on the part of this right-wing Supreme Court. 30 years ago, the state of California banned affirmative action, but without quite declaring it, they kept rigorous affirmative action policies in place for prison guards and cops all through the state. And nobody raised a hackle, much less an eyelash. Liberal racism is at base, I'm almost done, okay? Are we good? Liberal racism is at base a market in which value will change as rational or irrational actors weigh what they'll surrender for what they want. Tulip bulbs or electric cars or a police state with cops of color. And police state socialism, man, is sweeping the Anglophone world, especially around the North Atlantic. The example of the Supreme Court of the United States exempting the military brings to mind work such as Von Ware's book on military migrants, work of one of Cynthia Enlow's students about Gurkhas. I mean, we can go on and on and on and see the patterns and examples. Liberals understand structural objectivity too, as constraint via sedimented values over time. Democracy and the market are really hard to tease apart as a matter of theoretical practicality, and it's something I think we need to put our minds to more.
It's becoming second nature.
So what then is
It's
anti-structural, anti-racism opposition made of?
Here we go.
Structures lead me to thinking about institutions, and I'm not going to go into details because Arun already discussed in his remarks, but certainly a case in point is the IRR, which was established thanks to one of those global foundations of the earlier part of the 20th century, trying to figure out how to make the world safe for capitalism in the context of decolonization. And race relations became the theme, both here in the UK and the United States, for how to understand the particularities of different peoples in different places in order to draw them in to the capitalist mode of production or the colonial mode of production, whatever you want to call it.
Oh, hang on. Oh, that was so subtle and yet so beautiful at the same time. She just used capitalist mode of production and colonial mode of production interchangeably. She said, draw them into the capitalist mode of production or colonial mode of production, whatever you want to call it. What that means is that colonizer and capitalist mean the same thing. This is almost every term that these people use on a regular basis always rolls back to capitalism, because the four goals of the woke left are always and forever the same. No matter what they do, no matter what they say, they are always trying to do the same things. Gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. So in exactly the same way that whiteness means capitalism, and they have a whole rationale for why whiteness means capitalism, colonizer also means capitalism. And do you know what the common denominator is between whiteness being capitalism and colonizer being capitalism? Private property. Capitalists believe in private property, and colonizers are called colonizers because they take over and control land, which is considered to be private property. Is everyone clear on that? Every time these people complain about colonizers, it's because they're complaining about someone taking possession of private property because they want to abolish all private property. They don't want private property to exist. Does that make sense? These are the subtle things that we have to watch out for.
Designing institutions, of course, has been a huge global.
Whiteness does not refer to cultural property. It refers to private property. Capitalism is about holding private property. The number one goal that socialists, communists, Marxists have is to abolish all private property. They don't care about cultural property. They care about private property ownership.
Project throughout modernity. as imperialists partition and repartition the Earth's surface, and colonizers and neo-colonizers lay claim to resources. And in Q&A, we could discuss the Journal of Race Development,
Yes,
or the
please,
Ford
let's do
Foundation,
that.
or the Catholic Church, or the East India Company. I mean, we have many examples. So in this context, one of many questions to explore is how racial ethnic reorganization.
Well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. I'm a white conservative Trump supporter. I don't want anyone else's property. Why is Trump their ultimate enemy? Not the bullshit that the media will tell you. Why is Trump their ultimate nemesis? Because Trump is actually not that bad. Trump doesn't hate gay people. Trump's policies are actually relatively liberal, but we did talk about how they hate liberals earlier. Why is Trump their ultimate enemy? Answers in the chat. I already see one. Why is Trump their ultimate enemy? Because Trump is a capitalist. Trump is not just a capitalist. Donald Trump is like the ultimate cultural representation of capitalism. Trump is an unabashed, greed is good, everything gold, put my name on everything, owning all the golf courses. Trump is the ultimate capitalist private property owner. And that is why they hate Trump more than anything else in the world, because Trump is an individual representation of everything that these people want to destroy.
Organization of territories is happening now around the planet. This is not just like a white settler colony or white core EU thing. It's happening all over the planet. All over the planet. What are the impetuses that naturalize the notion that something called the nation state, or territorial approximation of the same, should determine freshly who's in and who's out? Right? It is happening in Burkina Faso. It is happening in South Africa. It is happening in Assam. It is happening in the Dominican Republic. It is happening as well in the UK and the US. You get my point. How do various views of sovereignty as self-determination, inflamed by NGOs as well as by so-called tradition, further this kind of racial action and activity? Let's see, I'm going to cut to a chase, if not the chase. We talked a little bit, or Arun talked a little bit about narration, and narrative is, for me, and we who study literature and drama and films, it is the ordering of time, right? That's what narrative is. Narrative orders time. And then there is, at the same time, or simultaneously, the geometric ordering of space. Whether we're talking about nation states who are in the process of pulling people in and pushing them out, or the shape of global commodity chains, or the shape of long-distance migration paths and the remittances that frequently follow those paths in the other direction, and so forth. So the narrative ordering of time and the geometric ordering of space is what oppositional work is making too. Whether we are talking about transnational labor unions, not all labor unions are a bunch of white guys, or the movement of various resources, migrants, and so forth, we see the production of space as well as the production of narratives about how that space should work, narratives. narratives that have a normative aspect to them. And I have a whole list of examples we could talk about, and I would love to talk about G-force while we're together. And I have a couple of gripes, which I'll end with, not to be a downer, but I have to say, I love your writing. I've read your work for many years, Arun.
I'm
so bored of reading the same
cider
paragraph
now.
about the same 2 or 3 white
Candy
people.
corn.
I'm just tired of it. Like, who cares? And it's, I guess it's a serious story because they keep popping up. Somebody always has something to say
7%
about
alcohol
David Harvey, Ellen Woods,
in a cider
Wendy Brown.
made of candy corn.
Who cares? You know, David's my
Can we just celebrate for a moment that capitalism has delivered me an alcoholic cider made from candy corn that is 7% alcohol? You're not getting this in any socialist Marxist utopia. This is America. This is what America stands for right here. Candy corn drunk cider. If you're drinking something fun in the chat, please let us know. Alcohol goes really well with Socialism Saturday. It makes it all much easier to comprehend. You will start to speak socialist no time if you drink with us. Of course, if you don't drink, that's fine too. We don't judge. But if you're drinking something fun, let us know in the chat, and please mount that like button while you're there.
my friend. David's my friend, but what, why are we wasting all this ink on this when we have all these all this other thinking to do? I'm also bored of reading the same 3 or 4 sentences about Marx, as though that nappy-headed nerd never had a fresh thought. For example, so-called primitive accumulation is called so-called primitive accumulation. It's not called primitive accumulation. That chapter is called so-called primitive accumulation for a reason, and it comes in chapter 26 in Capital Volume 1, also for a reason, which we might as well take seriously, rather than saying Marx didn't do this. Or, I don't know, write some fresh paragraphs about that. I have some questions about the nature of how we think about, or the politics through which we think about psychology, because Fanon's insights.
Well, Karina's going to be having a good night.
Psychology of the tortured and the torturer.
Good luck to you.
Have been very meaningful for many people, theoretically and presumably practically over time. And yet, at the same time, we turn our back on those who say, well, racism is, a psychological, it's unconscious, it's something else. So how do we reconcile or find the antagonistic contradiction within psychologizing and psychologizing? And the last thing I'd like to talk about is whether there's a tendency for all of us, no matter what we actually think, to try to look for the shelter of innocence to describe those whose lives have been completely upended by war, neoliberalism, structural adjustment, climate change, criminalization, and so forth. And talking about such people as fleeing suggests there's an innocence there that others don't share. So why don't we decide we all did it? Because to one degree or another we did, and upend the notion that there are ways of thinking historical protagonists through a lens of innocence when it's actually creative aggression that we must be attuned to and enhance. Thank you.
All right, Q&A.
Thank you. I've had the chance to read the book, and I think it's a very good book indeed, and I'm very pleased for this launch. It's not a gripe, it's just asking you to develop a certain theme, which is the content of the book is very much anti-imperialist as well as anti-capitalist, and you have a line in the book which says that liberals are blind to imperialism, or more words to that effect, or just don't give it any priority. And I think that's...
Ray, what does white mean? What does white mean, buddy? We're gonna drill this into your head. What does white mean? I'll wait for your answer. Jeff says, love the Q&A. Thank you for being a channel member, Jeff. I really do appreciate it. The Q&A is always the best part. You took 30 milligrams of edibles. You're going to be having fun tonight, girl. I don't judge. Just enjoy the ride. That's all I'm saying. Go do a nice meditation. You're going to be hallucinating into Tuesday. You're going to have a great old time. Just remember, it's going to end eventually. You know, order some fucking Taco Bell or something like that. Order a burrito or something. But we're going to go back to our friend Ray. Ray, what does that mean? What does that mean? What should you be hearing instead? Yes, capitalism is bad. This is something you need to train your brain to do. Every time you hear one of these people say white, hear capitalism. I promise you, I know this sounds silly, but all of this will make so much more sense when you understand that they mean capitalism.
Particularly true of Britain, I have to say. And it's in particularly true of what might be called the white left. You know, they just don't see their own country as being imperialist. And I just wondered whether you could speak more to that, because Roy debated with Lenin. Lenin wasn't the white left. I mean, he was breaking from imperialism. He was absolutely looking for revolt against colonialism.
Colonialism means capitalism.
We need more of that here.
I'll just talk. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, and I think you're right that I think that there's a particular problem with Britain in the way that we've sort of told this story about.
Oh, hang on.
Being a certain amount of...
We're actually having a better chat in the chat than we are in this presentation, but again, that's fine. This is going to be a pop quiz for people who have been around a while. If you are new to Socialism Saturday, I don't expect you to know this, but we're going to explain it. Grasshopper says, I find it fascinating how socialists depend on capitalism for their fancy clothes, phones, computers, etc. This is a pop quiz. Why is it okay for socialists to engage in capitalism according to the Communist Manifesto? This is literally written in the Communist Manifesto. Why is it acceptable for socialists to engage in capitalism? There is a very specific reason, and it's why, and we need to know it, because if you try to throw this at them, they're not going to blink, because it is considered acceptable for socialists to participate in capitalism for a very, very, very specific reason. Exactly. LK. Socialists are allowed to use systems of oppression in order to gain power. It's not just that, though. It's not just that, but that is part of it. They're allowed to break the rules for the greater good. This is it. George has got it. They justify that they have to engage in capitalism because they're part of the system. Essentially, what the Communist Manifesto says is that it is acceptable to engage in capitalism because that's just the system that you're in. You cannot survive in a system of capitalism if you don't engage in systems of capitalism. So they use capitalism to survive. They use capitalism to spread their message because they argue that until they overthrow the system of capitalism, it does not benefit them to not engage in capitalism. So they have to do it, not just to spread their message, though, but quite literally to survive. In order to pay their rent, they have to engage in capitalism. In order to buy food, they have to engage in capitalism. The primary argument is survival. It's okay for them to do it because they're trying to survive. And then if they can use it to spread their message, then they think it's better, you know?
Decades in the past, and that's kind of done and dusted now. And we haven't even begun to think through how that shapes what's happening now in Britain.
Hang on. It's totally okay to find it fascinating. The reason that I bring this up specifically is sometimes what we do is we will we'll stream snipe socialists on occasion. Like a lot of these socialist book publishers, they do like live presentations and things, and all I will snipe their stream and we'll talk about it as they're doing the presentation. And when that happens, we have the opportunity to go in and ask them questions. And one of the questions I never want to see someone from my chat ask is, why is it okay for you to engage in capitalism? Because that's what their answer is going to be. We want to make sure we're asking thoughtful questions that really drills down and that shows them that we understand their ideology. So asking them that question, that's like a layup. It's too easy. I think you're new here, so you haven't been around, so it's totally cool. But like people who have been here for a while, I just expect a more advanced knowledge. That's all. We want to be better, guys. We don't want to go for the easy layup. The easy layup is never going to get us anywhere. They're going to swat us away like a fly. They're going to say, oh, silly capitalists, silly Trump supporters, silly fascists. They just don't, they're going to make some comment like that. But, the times that they really get annoyed is when we ask them really good, thoughtful questions that shows them that we understand their ideology and we actually do listen to them. They don't get pissed off at this. They've heard this a million times. They really get pissed off when they know that we know their material. Rules for thee, but not for me. Well, not exactly, but kinda. I mean, everyone's a hypocrite, right, Beth? To some extent or another. So I guess my point is this. It's like, well, no, shouldn't socialists have as little... Why? They have to have a house. They have to eat. They have to have a job. It's the world they live in. Like, just because they don't agree with how the world is run doesn't mean they don't have to exist in the world. They're quite literally trying to overthrow the system. But they still have to pay their rent. They still have to pay their bills. They still have to eat food, right? Like, it's just a reality. But I promise you guys, like, if you go past the obvious questions, go past the obvious hypocrisy, I promise you, there are so many ways that you can call out socialists on their bullshit that actually dig much deeper into their ideology and will piss them off so much more. Like, wait till you get to the abolish the family stuff. Whoa, if you haven't seen that, you need to look that up. But like, if you go that extra mile, it's going to give you so much more return, I promise you. But you need to learn their ideology first, and that's why we do this. I mean, Autumn makes a good point. Autumn, broken clock is right twice a day. It's not hypocritical for socialists to buy food. They still need to eat.
Britain. I mean, there's amazing work that's been done actually opening those sort of questions up over the last few years. I mean, we don't pay any attention to the role of Britain as an imperialist power today, right? Separately from the question of the past and how that shapes Britain today, I mean, it astounds me.
This is really unhelpful. Really
so
unhelpful and unproductive.
Reflection in Britain on the political process that led to the decision to participate in the war in Iraq in 2003 and afterwards. But we can have that huge amount of kind of energy and focus on that stuff, which is
well, I mean, and Bot is making a good point. Bot says, just like how if the government offers me free money, I'm going to take it. If you took a stimulus check during the pandemic, if you took one of those $600 checks and you're complaining about socialists buying food, shut the fuck up. Honestly, if you take any government handouts at all, shut the fuck up. Because you're engaging in socialism when you do that. Don't ding one side for doing it if you yourself are doing it. You know what I'm saying?
Which is a debate about Alistair Campbell and Tony Blair and all that sort of stuff. And yet we've never even grappled with what happened in Iraq, really, right? And what this country did there. We've never grappled with that and what that really means, how we destroyed that country, right? And that's the most obvious example. But We could find many others. We haven't grappled with the role of the City of London as continuing to be central to the way that imperialism works today, right? And we have an agenda. You know, we will have to dismantle that stuff. We will have to think about ways of changing how the City of London works, not just because of how it distorts life in Britain, because of the effects it has around the world. The tax havens that Britain hosts around the world, right, where wealth that's sucked out of people's lives around the world is then hoarded and hidden, so we can't see where it is anymore, right? I mean, all these things are you know, Britain is playing a central role there, right? And so absolutely, you're right that these are things that we should be focusing on.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be able to ask a question, but I'm kind of surprised that there weren't a lot of other hands to compete with. But I unfortunately haven't read your book yet, but I really look forward to reading your book. But I'm very sympathetic to your argument. I think that sort of our time, it seems to be, there are so many horrors and injustices around, but also a great deal of confusion and hypocrisy and a big feeling of kind of disempowerment that sort of Anton Curtis summed up as like, the more the system fails, the harder it seems to imagine an alternative to it. So it's great to hear an argument that is very clear about it's the class struggle, stupid, and we should focus on that. But there was one thing I wanted to get your thoughts on, which you didn't mention in your talk, about where you see within your argument the meaning and role of critical race theory, which has had so much prominence and influence in recent years in academia
Ding, ding, ding.
and in society, and more broadly around identity politics, which can be seen in quite crude terms, but has a role of both
everyone
empowering
listen.
people, but can also divide people and obscure solidarity.
Okay, so I mean, on critical race theory, you know, I think you know, critical race theory is fundamentally an attempt within a particular academic discipline, law, right, to understand
wrong
how racism can continue to be such a force in the United States, because it's mainly focused on the United States. Even after the various legislative initiatives around the civil rights and so on, right? And that's essentially what it tries to do. And it comes up with a set of answers around that, some of which I think are valuable, some of which are not. It's a mixed bag for me. Obviously, the attack on CRT has absolutely nothing to do with the content of the work that's being done under it. It's simply a way of attacking any notion of anti-racist scholarship. And so, of course, we have to.
The attack on critical race theory is an attack on any notion of anti-racist scholarship. How are they defining anti-racist in this presentation? How explicitly are they defining anti-racist in this conversation? Well, of course, he's not telling the truth about critical race theory, but we're going to listen, guys. This is one of those moments where we have to overlook the bullshit that just came out of his mouth and focus in on the important part of what he's saying. The important part of what he's saying is any attack on critical race theory is an attack on any notion of anti-racist scholarship. And we know that he defines anti-racist as anti-capitalism, anti-capitalist, anti-capitalist, anti-capitalist. Critical anti-racism is anti-capitalist according to these people. That is explicit. So what that means is that any attack on critical race theory is an attack on anti-capitalism, because he just said out of his own mouth, and we'll listen to it again, any attack on critical race theory is an attack on any notion of anti-racist scholarship, and we know that anti-racist means anti-capitalist, according to him, not according to us, according to him. So what that means is any attack on critical race theory is an attack on any notion of anti-capitalist scholarship. Do you guys see the language game? Let's listen again. You really need to learn how to drown out the bullshit. Because the critical race theory isn't even taught in K through 12 schools. That is a distraction. Critical race theory is only taught in law schools. Distraction. Critical race theory is only in the United States. Distraction. We don't care about any of that. The only thing that we care about is the definitions of the terms that they themselves are putting forward as a way to reveal what they actually believe.
Legislative initiatives around civil rights and so on, right? And that's essentially what it tries to do. And it comes up with a set of answers around that some of which are, I think, are valuable, some of which are not. It's a mixed bag for me. Obviously, the attack on CRT has absolutely nothing to do with the content of the work that's been done under it. It's simply a way of attacking any notion of anti-racist scholarship, and so
any attack on CRT is a way of attacking any notion of anti-racist scholarship. So yes, suspicious bird, the best way of attacking critical race theory is by arguing in favor of capitalism. Exactly. That is exactly and explicitly correct. Critical race theory in the United States, and yes, of course, it's in K through 12 schools. I've documented that so extensively on my channel. It's not even worth repeating. But it is, and if people want proof of that, then they can look for it on my channel because it's all here. But critical race theory in the United States was never about race. It was always an attack on capitalism. That was always what it was. They were just using coded language in order to do it. So the very best thing that you can do to attack critical race theory in the United States is indeed arguing in favor of capitalism. Very well done. Let's see, just scrolling through the chat here. There are two pillars that we need to uphold in order to beat these people. Number one is the gender binary, that there are men and women, and it is a binary. Number two is capitalism. If we uphold capitalism and we uphold the gender binary, then we win and they lose. Capitalism is individual private ownership of yourself, your labor, your skills, your time, and what you trade with for others. Private ownership of capitalism. Capitalism also upholds individualism, that we are an individual as opposed to a collective, which these people want us to be a collective. We believe in individualism. Capitalism also upholds meritocracy, which is what we want. That's true equality. That's equality of opportunity. It's everyone shows up and the best man gets the job. That's what we want. We want individualism, meritocracy, and private property. And all of those things are directly counter to critical race theory. I'm just going to play this last part one more time and then we're going to let it play.
That's been done under it. It's simply a way of attacking any notion of anti-racist scholarship, and so of course we have to fight back against that. That doesn't mean that we have to accept every conclusion that CRT scholars come up with. I think on the part about identity, you asked about identity politics, which is, I mean, it depends what we mean by identity politics, right? That's always where you've got to start with that question, because for a lot of people, identity politics simply means you're interested in some kind of movement for liberation that starts from.
No, it's not that he doesn't support CRT. It's that he is not an American. This is not a Marxist thing. This is a British versus American thing. He supports all the end goals of critical race theory. He probably doesn't understand explicitly what critical race theory is trying to do because he is not American, he is British.
An identity that might be a racial identity, an ethnic identity, a gender identity, right? And that's where we all start. We all start with some kind of positioning, some kind of identity in our society, and we're thinking that through when we're trying to think about the world we're in, and we move from there. The problem is to end there and think that that's the, that one's identity is the start and end point of one's politics, right?
He just said the problem is that when you end at race. So his problem is not at critical race theory. His problem is when people are only focused on race and not on capitalism. What he is talking about fundamentally are the useful idiots of critical race theory in the United States who truly believe that critical race theory is about race. His problem is the useful idiots don't understand that race is not actually their problem, that capitalism is their problem. So he's essentially saying critical race theory does not go far enough. That's what he's suggesting. Does that make sense to people? It's kind of like real critical race theory has never been tried sort of thing. Critical race theory doesn't go far enough to solve the problems as he sees it. And the problem as he sees it is capitalism.
So when we think about identity can mean an idea that we are shaped by some kind of set of cultural norms that makes us who we are, that's kind of passed on from generation to generation, right? A very fixed idea of identity. And I think that's misconceived about how human beings are. And I think it's, in the end, politically conservative, because it is an idea of identity that erases the possibility of us always creating a new, right? Because in a way, if you take that view of identity, that who you are is fixed in some way, you're kind of putting yourself in a conservative box of never being able to really change very much. But if we're going to change everything, right, as we should be doing, we need to imagine that identity is a process, right, that's always unfolding, and it's something we're always making anew, right? And if we do that, then identity politics, a politics of identity, doesn't have to be something that erects these fundamental barriers between us. Now, in particular contexts, whether we, the book talks about Jamil Al-Amin, formerly known as H. Rap Brown, leader of the Black Power movement, and Ruthie referred to him as well. Now, what he was thinking about was, he's talking about a kind of, he's starting from the position that white supremacy has inculcated a negative idea of blackness in everyone's minds, white and black, right? And that there has to be some kind of process of grappling with that as a starting point to some kind of radical politics at this moment, right? In the 1960s. So there's an identity politics there, but it's not the identity politics that says that you can derive your political vision from simply the fact of your blackness. It's an attempt to say you start there, but then you go forward. And in the end, the question that he's asking is, as Black people in the late 1960s, do we build a movement with white people in the United States to change the United States in the fundamental revolutionary ways that he was interested in doing? Or is that not going to work at that particular moment because white people aren't going to be revolutionaries with us? So then in that case, are we going to look for revolutionaries elsewhere? And that's what he says to do.
Why wouldn't white people be revolutionaries with them? Because whiteness doesn't mean white, it means capitalist. I know it's confusing, guys. Every single time you hear these people say white, you need to think capitalist. It's not that. It's not that these people believe that no white people ever, based on skin color, will embrace social justice, because that's provably not true. White people have been advocating for this for decades, based on skin color. The reason he said that white people will not be revolutionaries is because he does not mean white as in skin color, he means it as in capitalist.
To look for them in Puerto Rico, to look for them in Vietnam, to look for them in Palestine, right? And so it's a matter of looking at that particular set of circumstances and figuring out how the question of identity and how the question of building with others is going to work at that particular time. But it's not an answer for all time, and it's always a process. Do you want to share some thoughts on that?
I'd love to. That's all right. Yeah. I was thinking when I read that section of your book a lot about Steve Biko and the Black Consciousness movement in South Africa. And many people erroneously think the Black Consciousness movement was a separatist movement. They think that because they don't read anything about the movement. They just read the title and think they know what it says.
Except that, John, it's worked in every single context that I've used it. So just because you want to feel like a poor put upon white person because you're having feelings right now, facts don't care about your feelings. It has literally worked in every single context that I've used it when referencing these people. It's not even hard, bro. You just got to put aside your desire to be a poor abused white person. You are not a poor abused white person.
Including there were white South Africans who thought that, like they just didn't bother. And what Biko's argument again was we have to make ourselves anew. Let's like think of the old new man, new woman, new person, new human. And in doing so, we become able to do the necessary thing, which is to combine our energy with the energy of other oppressed people, whoever they are, in order to make a new world.
The people that used critical race theory to make white people the poor oppressed victims of the world were not the people actually advancing these ideas. They were conservatives. And I say that because I used to get fooled by this too. I got fooled by this too because of the conservative talking points on it. The people who have successfully branded critical race theory as being against white people are people who did not understand what critical race theory was in the first place, and they took everything on face value because they did not understand that these people speak in code. Critical race theory does not actually vilify white people. The woke left doesn't vilify white people. The woke left lifted up Robin DiAngelo, who is a white woman, as the patron fucking saint of critical race theory for years. Robin DiAngelo was the go-to person for diversity training for years. Robin DiAngelo is white. Critical race theory has never been against white people. They are only against white people who disagree with critical race theory. Critical race theory has never been pro-black people. They hate black people who disagree with critical race theory. Once you understand the code, you will understand why this happened. It was always about capitalism. There was never a time when it was not about capitalism. And anyone that argues that it was is probably a conservative. Rottweiler says, white people are the bourgeois. Minorities are the proletariat / agitators. It's not about race. It's about class struggle with a twist. You guys have got to do your homework and you've got to listen. Hang on, just scrolling through the chat. Thank you, Rottweiler. I do appreciate it. The people who have advanced the talking points about white culture are not on the left. They are on the right. You are talking, bro, what John here is doing is advancing literal white identitarian talking points. You are advancing the talking points of the most toxic people on the right. No one on the left talks about white culture. The right talks about white culture. The right, the conservative right, the alt-right, the white identitarian right are the ones advancing the talking points about white culture. It is not coming from these people. It is coming from the right. Everyone who believes that critical race theory is about race is because you have been lied to by people on the right. That never came from the left. It came from the right. I'm sorry to get agitated about this, but it's like some people are just not listening. Some people are just not listening at all. Oh, Matt Walsh has done immeasurable damage. Matt Walsh has done immeasurable damage. Who else has done immeasurable? Pretty much everyone at the Daily Wire has done immeasurable damage. Pretty much Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk is one of the patron saints of doing immeasurable damage. I cannot even begin. Every single conservative influencer on Twitter has done immeasurable damage. All of them. All of them. And I'm really sorry for you guys that have been lied to. They were using white to mean capitalism. They did not mean white people as in skin color. They were using white to mean capitalism. Private property owners, capitalists, bourgeois, landlords. Bro, wake the fuck up or go somewhere more remedial. The right confuses it because the flowery language is designed to confuse them. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Hey, Brian, I do appreciate you sticking around. Can I explain critical race theory in 2 minutes? Critical race theory is an ideology that was started in academia in the 70s that says racism exists everywhere, in every person, in everything, in every interaction. And the job of the critical race theorist is to explore how, not if, but how racism occurs in every single interaction or situation or institution, because racism is always assumed to have occurred. In the United States, racism is assumed to have occurred because racism means capitalism, and capitalism is the engine that runs the United States. James Lindsay would say that critical race theory is the belief that racism is the fundamental organizing principle of society. Again, race in that context can be replaced by capitalism because capitalism is indeed the fundamental organizing principle of society. If you look at the museum thing, Peter, every single one, I know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about the display in the African American History Museum. If you look in the display that was featured in the African American History Museum, and I recently wrote about this on my Substack, every single feature of white supremacy was a feature of capitalism. Upholding time, working hard, showing up, writing things down. These are all features of capitalism. Every single thing that was in that museum display that people are all up in arms around, the characteristics of a white supremacist culture, every single one of those features are a feature of Actually, you know what? Let's go look at it, because I actually recently wrote about this. I have it on my Substack. We're already talking about it, so let's go look at it real quick. I promise. I recently, actually, shit, I'm going to have to log in under a different browser because I made this a premium. No, actually, no. I didn't make this a premium article. Hang on. I didn't make that section of it a premium article. I recently wrote about this specifically in an article called Why Time is White Supremacy. And we looked at the aspects of white supremacist culture. Okay, here is the museum thing that Peter was just talking about, the aspects of a white supremacist culture. It's actually bigger on this one than it is on the other screen, so we'll just zoom in there. The aspects of a white supremacist culture. This was featured in the Museum of African American History in Washington, D.C. in the summer of 2020. Rugged individualism is capitalism. Capitalism cannot exist without rugged individualism. Rugged individualism cannot exist under socialism. Rugged individualism means capitalism. Family structure, capitalism. We have talked extensively on this channel about how communists want to abolish the nuclear family. If you look up abolish the family on my channel, you will find at least 16 different streams about abolish the family. Family structure is a feature of capitalism. It is not a feature of Marxism. Emphasis on the scientific method is objective thinking, rational thinking, linear thinking. That is a feature of capitalism. History is about actually telling accurate history, which is again going to support capitalism. Protestant work ethic. Why does a work ethic have anything to do with skin color? Do you need a good work ethic? Do you need a good work ethic to engage in capitalism? I think you do. That's another feature of capitalism. Religion is about them wanting to get rid of any religion. It doesn't really have to do with capitalism. It's more about them wanting to undermine any belief system that does not relate directly back to Marxism. So religion is more important to people than Marx. So they have to get rid of religion. That's just a functional feature of socialism. Status, power, authority. Wealth equals your job. Your job is who you are. Respect authority. That's a feature of capitalism. Future orientation is about planning. That's a feature of capitalism. Time, following a schedule. Time viewed as a commodity. That is explicitly a feature of capitalism. Aesthetics, based on a European culture, steak and potatoes, That's more, aesthetics is more about attacking the gender binary. You know how I said earlier there were two pillars that needed to be upheld? They needed to be gender binary and capitalism. The aesthetics thing is more about attacking the gender binary than it is about capitalism, but it still indicates that this is about Marxism. Holidays is a capitalism. Justice is more about that's going to be about capitalism. And competition, the biggest one on the whole damn display, competition, that is directly about capitalism. Every single feature on this museum thing that Peter said was about race is not about race at all. It's either about capitalism or the gender binary, or a third option, anything that gets in the way of adherence to Marx over anything else. None of this is about race, guys. None of this is about race. It's almost entirely about capitalism. Now that you know that, are you looking at this document any differently? This document that you referenced, Peter, saying it was in the museum, is almost entirely about dismantling capitalism. Does everyone see? Remember how we were all confused? What did these things have to do with race? These things had nothing to do with race. Had nothing to do with it at all. They don't care about race. There's a chance I may have misinterpreted Peter and just yelled at him for 10 minutes over a misinterpretation. And if I did that, I'm sorry. But the point still remains. None of this was about race to begin with. And it was still a positive exercise, Peter, even if you felt personally attacked. That wasn't my intention. All right. Let's keep going. We have about 13 minutes left, guys. We are almost done. You won't have to listen to me yell anymore. Why do I think they called it whiteness? Because they are explicitly trying to use racial tensions to cause division. What fires people up more? Racism or class struggle? They tried class struggle for years and years and years and years and years. People don't really care about class struggle. Do you know what people do care about? Racism. Race is the easiest way to demonize your enemy. Calling someone a racist is one of the most terrible things you can call someone. It's a weapon. Why wouldn't they use the sharpest knife they have in the toolbox? If you're telling them to use class struggle to advance their arguments, that's a dull knife, man. I mean, maybe it'll get the job done if you cut hard enough, but it's going to be much easier to use the sharpest knife, which is racism. It was convenient. That's why they did it. It was convenient. Peter is indeed still king of the chat. Peter is perpetual king of the chat. It cannot be taken away unless he really does something to fuck it up. But I don't know what that thing would be. Peter cannot be unkinged as the chat. King of the chat. It is a right-wing pundit thing though, Peter. But this is the thing. The right is just, they're not listening. The right, it's not that the right doesn't have this information. The right use race to piss people off and rile people up just as much as the left does. The right has access to all this information. I've been trying to teach it to them for fucking years. They ignore it. Eventually I gave up because they don't want to learn. It's actually an important distinction explaining to people that the right's influencers are misunderstanding because they are under, well, that we agree on. And I think I really do think we are saying the same thing, to be honest. Peter, you know I can't stand conservative influencers for precisely this reason. They don't understand what they're talking about and they misinform their audience. They lie to their audience and it makes it impossible to teach their audience real things and it pisses me off. So I think we do actually agree. Let's see. Again, it was the right-wing influencers that did that, not the left-wing influencers. It was the right-wing influencers who did it, not the left-wing influencers. And the fact that you're still focusing on race, why are you still focusing on race? Race is not what's important here in any way, shape, or form. All right. Let's try to wrap up, guys. We got about 15 minutes left. You're all doing a great job. Lots of people hanging in there tonight. Let's wrap up the Q&A, and we can continue, of course, to have any chat in the chat that we would like.
In that case, it was South Africa, but in order to make a new world. And so, as Arun said in his discussion of the kinds of organizations that arise from the ground that then become the possibility for making change, the Black consciousness movement, as is to so many movements around the planet, started with very local things, people doing things that, as Stuart Hall puts it, bite into their existence in order to do something else, to rearrange the present, which then opens the possibility of thinking the future differently and noticing also who else is being bitten, right? Who else is existing.
You can do whatever you want, David, but if you're going to focus on race issues instead of things that actually matter, then you are actually causing more problems, not less. So you can do whatever you want. If you really want to make the argument that black people are the bane of society because you're going to make some sort of argument that they disproportionately commit more crime instead of focusing on why they're doing it, what you're going to do is come off as incredibly racist, which is going to give these people more ammo, which is also, by the way, going to piss off every single black person that could potentially have voted Republican until you fucking piss them off with your racist bullshit. So you can do whatever you want. If you want to turn off black voters, you've got a great strategy. If you want to give these people more ammunition, you've got a great plan. It's not what I would do. You seem to want the left to win. I don't want the left to win, but you do you, bro. You do you.
Is being bad. So if we think of identification as identification of purpose, that might like free us from being stuck in characteristics as somehow the limit, rather than the opening possibility. Thank you.
Hi, there's been a through line in your talk today about this kind of like trifecta of neoliberalism, liberalism, and I guess structural anti-racism. And I was wondering if you could expand on how you theorize and draw on or critique fascism, particularly because I think fascism is, or liberalism is fascism's like non-antagonistic kin. And I think fascism, perhaps more blatantly than liberalism, demonstrates how race is always already gendered, sexualized, class, etc. So how do you formulate, I guess, how does fascism, I guess, subtend this trifecta that you've been critiquing so far? And what is, I guess, structural anti-racism's kind of formulation within that?
Just to give some people context for the true definition of fascism, we watched a presentation the other day from Hofstra University in which an economics professor defined fascism as free market capitalism. And if you don't believe me, the clip is on my channel. They believe that the definition of fascism is free market capitalism. Oh, we got some good racists in my chat today. We've got some real racists in my chat today. And those racists are going to get banned very, 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 very quickly. It's probably because the presentation is about anti-racism. And all the real racists are getting all their feelings in a bunch because I'm saying it's not about race. And they're like, everything is about race and black people are bad. And I'm like, you know, we're not doing that shit here, guys. I don't play this game. If you're a real racist and you are pushing this whole white people are poor, abused victims of the system, like, this is not the place for you. I promise you.
Well, I think one of the things I try and think about in the book is that there's actually two different ways of thinking about fascism as well that correspond to
here we
these
go.
two traditions, right? So in the sort of liberal story, fascism emerges as this kind of moment of a break with liberal democracy, right? It's the kind of collapse of liberal democracy. It's this kind of one-off event that then we enter into a new era where we're now in a fascist era, right? A fascist government. And so then the debate is always, are we on the verge of that break, right? And you know, when Donald Trump got elected president, you saw this massive, you know, kind of flurry of texts and people say, having this debate, is Trump a fascist? You know, how do we save liberal democracy? Are we on the verge of it falling off this cliff into fascism, right? And of course, the radical tradition sees fascism differently, right? Because it's about saying fascism is present in a lot more places and a lot more times. In ways that are less about this dramatic break, but more about an everyday tendency. As soon as you have a state with the capacity to inflict violence through police forces, through military, through borders, through prisons, right?
That's capitalism. Say it.
A kind of tendency to fascism just inherent in those infrastructures, and that's something that will be experienced differently by different peoples.
Remember, these people believe that the police came from capitalism. The police are a symptom of capitalism. The police only exist because private property owners, slave owners, because the slaves were considered private property, needed people to go catch the escaped slaves and bring them back. They believe that the entire prison industrial complex came from capitalism. I am desperate for the satisfaction of this guy using the specific term capitalism in conjunction with fascism, because he's waffling around it. He's saying any government, any state that has police is fascist. He's trying so hard not to say it. I really want him to say it. Let's just rewind a little bit. You can hear how he's talking about police, borders. That's all fascism.
It's about this dramatic break, but more about an everyday tendency. As soon as you have a state with the capacity to inflict violence through police forces, through military, through borders, through prisons, right? There's a kind of tendency to fascism just inherent in those infrastructures, and that's something that will be experienced differently by different peoples, right? Based on things like race, right? So I think when you look at it that way, you see a different picture, and of course, this is Aimé Césaire, I think is key here, right? In thinking about how the story that gets told about how fascism emerges in Europe leaves out the fact that fascism was there in the colonial infrastrucures.
Colonial is capitalism.
And it comes back to Europe, right? It's the
colonialism is capitalism.
Of particular forms of political violence returning to Europe from where they'd been deployed for a long time, right? And I think that's as true today as it was in the 1950s, 40s when he's writing that. Donald Trump is the war on terror coming home to me, right? Like
why?
Both in terms of the Islamophobia that was central to his first election campaign, as well as the fact that it's the kind of military defeats that the United States experienced in its wars that were not ever necessarily described as military defeats, but that's what they were, and that's how they were understood by military personnel, right? Who then come back, and there needs to be some explanation, right, for what's happened here, what's gone wrong, right? And someone like Donald Trump and the broader kind of far-right movements in the United States are offering that explanation. They're saying, yeah, the reason that the United States can't win a war anymore is because we've been weakened by, and then fill in whatever you want, whether it's immigrants, Muslims, trans people, etc.
He's trying so hard not to say it because he knows this is being recorded. Say it.
The way, it's for that reason that the crucial political implication of that is we don't fight fascism by defending the very institutions that make it possible.
Capitalism.
The way we fight fascism is by taking on those institutions.
Those capitalist institutions.
The old argument that used to get a lot in Britain as well was that fighting fascism is a form of anti-racism, and in fact, the most important thing.
Okay, we didn't quite get him to say capitalism, but what did we get him to say? Fighting fascism is a form of anti-racism. And what does anti-racism mean, according to him, in the literal title of the presentation? What does anti-racism mean? What are we fighting? What are we fighting? What are we fighting when we're fighting fascism? And he might still say it yet. He might still say it, but he did just say fighting fascism is anti-racism. And what does anti-racism mean? Anti-racism is anti-capitalism. It's anti-capitalism. It's anti-capitalism. It's anti-capitalism. It never fails. If we just let them talk, they say it eventually, and then we just need to know what to listen for. But let's let him continue. We'll rewind a little bit so we can just appreciate that part again.
In Britain as well was that fighting fascism is a form of anti-racism, and in fact, the most
Anti-capitalism.
important form of anti-racism. But in fact, it's the other way around, right? We fight racism in order to remove the possibility of fascism, right?
Which is
It's not that
capitalism.
fascism is the core of our anti-racist struggle, in the sense of, you know, defeating the far right. The far right are a symptom of a broader and deeper problem,
Which is
that we need to tackle.
capitalism.
And we're not going to defeat the far right unless we do that first.
Can I ask you something?
Oh, Ruth, come on,
Could you
Ruth.
talk about
Come
the
on.
rise of fascism elsewhere in the world? Like, leave Europe for a moment?
She wants to talk about the United States. Do it, Ruth.
Sure,
Do
sure.
it. Get him to
I
say
mean-
it, Ruth. Ruth wrote a book called Racial Capitalism. So I have high hopes that Ruth is going to get this back on track for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think so let's see, where do I want to go?
America.
Let's go to India.
Let's go to India.
Ah, damn. I will say, though, our favorite queer Marxist ever, Violet. Who remembers Violet? Who can possibly forget Violet during our queer Marxism marathon? If you weren't here for the queer Marxism marathon, you need to look up the queer Marxism marathon. Our favorite queer Marxist, Violet, is from India. And so hopefully we get some Violet energy in the presentation now, because that was one of the most insane things we have ever watched on this channel ever.
What's that?
Is the return migration?
Yeah, let's go India. Okay, well, I think I would make exactly the same arguments about India, right? Exactly the same. And this is why, because for the same reasons that fascism thrives in a racist society like Britain or the United States, it thrives in a society like India, whose political economy depends on
Capitalism.
social differentiations that are race-like, right? So, for example, the oppression of Muslims in India, for example, the caste system in India. These are
This
things
is
that have
word
long
salad. He's
histories,
making this up. He doesn't know
but
what he's talking about.
in the modern
He's
era
reaching
of
here just to
colonial
have an
capitalism,
answer.
and then after independence, get taken up in ways that reify those divisions and distinctions, and give them a different kind of social function to what they would have had in the pre-colonial era. And then that becomes the kind of reservoir from which fascist movements like the RSS, the BJP, the Hindutva, Sangh Parivar, etc., can then gradually over time start to find a base. The RSS, which is the kind of I think we can say that the RSS, which is the sort of
What you're seeing right now in real time is like when you took a test in high school and you got an essay question that you didn't really know the answer to, but you kind of thought that if you bullshitted around for like several pages, you would probably hit on something. So what he's doing right now is like, he doesn't really know the answer to this question, but he's kind of bullshitting. He has no idea about fucking India, right? Like, but he's kind of bullshitting around, and he's like, if I just keep talking, eventually I'm going to land on something that sounds smart. That's exactly what you're seeing in front of you in real time.
foot soldiers of fascism in India is the largest social movement in the world. Millions of members who who believe in essentially turning India into a kind of Hindu fascist state. We can learn a lot
and
from.
Touche, this is also true. Yeah, the audience probably doesn't realize
I
this.
think the fact that
exactly
the picture has these similarities and we can make these transnational comparisons tells us that what we're dealing with here is not about, what we're dealing with here is about the neoliberal world, right? That we've built up. That that is
Look, he looks so
generating these
confused.
processes in
This is
India
so
as much
great.
as it is in the UK and the United States.
He has like no fucking idea how to answer that. Ruth.
We're out of time.
Oh
No, I just want to
no.
ask a follow-up because this is really
Do it,
interesting.
Ruth. Drive
It
him in the right
seems to me
direction.
then that
Do it.
maybe
Do it.
what the dynamic is thinking racism and fascism as co-constitutive interdependencies might mean it's not a matter of we fight fascism by fighting racism or the other way around, but that the fight is constantly shaping. That fighting fascism must be fighting racism will be fighting fascism. Do you see what I'm saying?
And how are we defining
Yeah,
racism?
absolutely. But I think,
Capitalism.
I think there's a tendency to, I think in Britain, for example, there's been a tendency to say, we have to prioritize fighting particular far-right organizations, and the anti-racist struggle kind of gets
Anti-racism means
simplified
capitalism.
and reduced down to just that goal, right?
Mhm.
And that's the, and so I think that's mistaken, and I think we need to see that, we're missing a much bigger picture if we do.
Agreed.
Just one very quick question, and crediting Liam, who I think in a workshop earlier raised it. I wasn't even there, but it was a question.
Boo,
My
they
name is
didn't say
Ali.
it.
I've worked in 2 largely liberal foundations that are resourcing movements work. And what has happened in the sort of Lankelly Chase, where I currently work, is that we had an announcement that we are wholly redistributing assets. And I was very surprised to read in the Guardian article, our chief exec quoting Cedric Robinson. And I was like, I never had you for reading such literature. And I think we are at a space where those liberal institutions that you were initially anxious about their responses are discovering these traditions and responding with ideas of relinquishing control, or there is nothing to be done, let's burn it all away. And I wonder what is the response that is evolved in the United States, because that response of diversity training can't go on forever. So they must have some new responses to contend with the radical history, because like now, after 2020, they've had time to read a bit.
What's that foundation called? Something Kelly Chase Kelly. Yeah. I got quite a chuckle. I'm not altogether sure the CEO read Cedric Robinson. He might have glanced at the title of something that maybe Robin Kelly wrote in the Boston Review and pretend, which is how most people I encounter pretend to know Cedric's work, which is nothing against Robin, whose work is awesome. I think that the really, really, really fat foundations aren't about to disband themselves. I mean, even like Soros, which is a big foundation, announced more than 10 years ago that it was going to unroll in 10 years. It's still around. But the big ones, the mega ones like Ford and Mellon and so forth, they're not going anywhere. And they will continually practice what Olufemi Taiwo calls elite capture and take ideas from the ground and then...
Do you guys remember earlier how I chastised people for conflating Klaus Schwab and the WEF with Marxists? Do you guys remember that? And now we're seeing Ruth Wilson Gilmore chastise George Soros and Ford and all of these other major multinational corporations for elite capture because she's pissed off that they take their ideas and bastardize them.
Turn them into something fundable and reproducible and measurable and all those bubbles, which...
What economic system might reproduce ideas that are measurable and fundable and reproducible? What economic system might take their ideas and bastardize them by, putting metrics around them and, putting money behind them and making them reproducible and and actually measuring goals? What kind of capitalism? And yet Ruth Wilson Gilmore is pissed off at George Soros and Ford and all these other national elitist organizations for taking their ideas and then putting money behind them and making them engage in capitalism.
Doesn't mean never take their money and go, thank you, and then go do the thing you were going to do. And then send them the report, or don't. And
she basically just told people to steal George Soros's money, smile to his face, and then give him the finger because they don't like these people. This is what I was trying to explain earlier. These people, the real socialist activists, do not like George Soros. They do not like the WEF. They do not like Klaus Schwab. They do not like Bill Gates. They'll take money from them because they need to use the resources of the evil capitalists in order to fund their evolution, their revolution rather. But they don't like these people. They don't want to work with these people. They consider these people to essentially be traitors to everything they're trying to achieve. This is really important for people to understand, guys. These are not the same groups at all.
So, philanthropy is private allocation of the stolen social wage. You know that. We all know that. And it's not going anywhere. And
the private social wage is capitalism.
And the extent to which one of the kind of urgent human movement issues on the planet is the production of stateless people, or people who are virtually stateless, goes hand in hand with the production of stateless money. Like all this money that's hiding out, enabled by, whatever tax authorities, is hiding out in places not only like the Cayman, it's hiding out in the United States of America, in South Dakota. Like that's the number 2 offshore loot hiding places on the planet. And we can tell an entire story about colonialism, indigenous genocide, treaty non-respect, the complete abandonment of rural peoples, whatever their race, ethnic origin is, and the rise of credit card debt as a way for people whose wages have not changed to be able to buy the things they need or even the things they want. I got nothing against desire. And South Dakota, the center of all of these activities, including changed usury laws, is also the place where all these richies hide their loot. It's all right there. It's all right there. So there's so much to be done.
Oh, look at that. Look at the cover of that book. All right, guys, you endured one hell of a Socialism Saturday this week. I want everyone to give themselves a nice round of applause, a nice pat on the back. Well done. You made it. We covered a lot of ground this week, and we had a lot of new people here, and I just want to welcome all the new people. I hope I didn't scare you away. I do get a little intense sometimes because I have to repeat these things over and over and over again every day of my life, and I've watched more socialism content than almost anyone on the planet. And that isn't actually a socialist. I've watched socialism content to understand it, not because I'm actually a socialist. And so I really hope everyone made it. We do Socialism Saturday every Saturday at 6 p.m. Sometimes we even get a nice little midweek socialism. We did get a little midweek socialism this week with our favorite abolish the family socialist, Sophie. So if you have yet to watch our nice midweek socialism with abolish the family socialist, Sophie Lewis, that would be a great next step if you're new here. But I do hope you guys return. The more socialism you watch, the easier it will be to understand it. And we do this every single week, and I do try to make it fun. On Sundays, I usually do not stream. I'm not anticipating streaming tomorrow. Sometimes I do a surprise stream here and there, but I don't anticipate doing that tomorrow. But I do want to remind everyone that you can attend movie night with us. Where's my movie night promo? You can attend movie night with us tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. in the supporter Discord. We do movie night every Sunday at 8 p.m. in the supporter Discord. And tomorrow we are watching Inception for the 1-year anniversary of movie night. I hope you guys will join us. And by the way, for all the new people, I just want to say, if I yell at you, it's because I like you and I want you to learn. If I didn't care about you learning and growing and really understanding what was going on, I wouldn't yell at you because it would be a waste of my time. So I hope you take it in the spirit in which it was meant. But do come and join us for movie night. You can get invited to movie night in several ways. You can become a member of this here YouTube channel. You'll get access to the supporter Discord. You can become a member of my Substack or of my Locals or of my Patreon. All the links are in the description below. That's $8 a month, $80 a year, or more if you want to. And I really do appreciate it. I am funded 100% entirely by you. I am looking forward to seeing folks for movie night tomorrow, and we're going to have a great time. And I am planning on posting some stuff on my Substack later tonight. I'm going to be working up a couple articles after we get done, even though I've had a cider and a half. So we'll see how that goes. If you would like to be notified by email when those articles are up, head over to Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com, and you can sign up as a free subscriber, or you can sign up for $8 a month, $80 a year, and you guys help support the work I'm doing. I try to give you as many perks as I can, and I really do appreciate the support. All right, guys, that's all we have for tonight. 3.5 hours of socialism. You guys all did a great job. We'll see you on Monday at 5 p.m. for my next stream, unless I see you at movie night tomorrow night. Take care, guys. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you soon. Bye.